121. How could they be so depraved? Not long after Lynn returned home, the system notification chimed. Ding! Mission complete. Mundungus has been arrested. Rewards have been issued. Crack! A house elf appeared right in front of Lynn. It looked neat and presentable. By Lynn's standards, it was far better looking than the kitchen elves. Master, Dudu is very happy to serve you. Lynn nodded. I'll give you a name. From now on, you'll be called Dudu. Dudu? It sounds a bit like dog, but since Master named it, Dudu accepts. Lynn thought, I will not allow this to be a naming failure. The next day at noon, sunlight poured through the kitchen window, lighting up the tidy room. Dudu, dressed in a brand new set of work clothes, was wielding a kitchen knife with vigor, chopping and preparing ingredients. The air smelled of toasted bread and frying bacon. A pot of stew bubbled on the stove. Dudu's face was the picture of concentration. This was its first real job as a formal employee, and it was determined to show everything it knew. The kitchen door opened, and Lynn walked in, a heavy stack of new books floating behind him, the titles glinting in the light. He set the stack down on a clear spot of counter. Dudu immediately stopped and leaned in, curious and respectful. It picked up the top book, tilted its head, and read the title, Chinese Famous Recipes, Illustrated Collector's Edition. The cover showed a glossy Peking duck and translucent shrimp dumplings. The picture was so realistic you could almost smell them. Dudu blinked, confused. It put that book down and opened the next, 160 authentic Sichuan dishes. A page was full of bright red chilies and a steaming dish of boiled fish fillets. Dense notes and ingredient lists made its head spin. The third book, Popular Recipes, was a little more ordinary but still full of ingredients and techniques it had never seen. Flipping further, complete collection of pastry making, Cantonese slow-cooked soups, home banquet dishes, each was richly illustrated. Dudu's curiosity turned to horror almost instantly. The book trembled in its hands, its ears drooped. Master, Dudu's elders never taught these. Dudu is. Stop! Hold it right there! Lynn cut off the elf's self-flagellation before it could begin. Do house elves always apologize like this? Lynn said. If you don't know something, learn it. Who's born knowing how to make a Manchu-Han imperial feast? He tapped the Chinese famous recipes. Start simple. For example, scrambled eggs with tomatoes isn't hard. We have the ingredients. And mapo tofu. I'm hungry. Go make lunch. Today let's have the stew and toasted bread. Starting tomorrow, try one recipe from these books every day for practice. House elves really did have maxed out housekeeping and cooking skills. Although Dudu was initially terrified by the pile of Chinese cookbooks, its learning ability and eagerness to research were terrifyingly efficient. As a result, Lynn's original travel plans stalled. His schedule became, Monday, Dudu, how about Yuxiang shredded pork for lunch? For dinner, braised pork belly looks good. Tuesday, yesterday's braised pork was a little too sweet but good. Let's do something lighter, steamed sea bass and garlic broccoli. Wednesday, Hermione, are you free? Come to my place for lunch. My elf is learning Chinese cooking and needs a judge. Thursday, Lynn, what happened to the Northern Lights? The pyramids? How can you be so depraved? Your will's been crushed by sugar-coated bullets. By noon, the smell of twice-cooked pork drifting from the kitchen had already broken his will. Friday, after a bowl of mapo tofu and rice, Lynn finally managed to admit defeat. Rubbing his belly, he told Dudu, who was busy on its feet but had sparkling eyes, Dudu, I have a new task for you. Go to the Ministry of Magic and handle the exit procedures. Destination, Norway. For now, make it 1 month. The procedures weren't that quick. Knowing their master was going on a long trip, Dudu worked even harder to show off its new skills before he left. So the feasting continued. For many days in a row, Lynn's dining table featured an almost non-repeating parade of dishes, from the bold heat of Sichuan cuisine to the delicate subtleties of Cantonese soups. Dudu learned at an astonishing speed. Lynn finally understood why Goyle and Crab had gotten so fat. Who could resist a house elf with god-tier cooking at home? Beep, beep, beep. Lunchtime again. Lynn sat facing crystal shrimp dumplings and a milky fish head tofu soup when his phone rang with a video call. It was Edgar. Lynn wiped his hands and answered. Edgar's big face filled the screen. Lynn, you... He saw the steaming spread on Lynn's table and froze. His eyes widened. He looked at the plain sandwich in his own hand. Then back at the restaurant-quality dishes on Lynn's side, and a fierce sense of injustice rose in him. With a trembling finger, he pointed at the screen. You're eating again? Do you know what time it is? And what even is that? It looks all fancy and colorful. Lynn, used to this reaction, slowly moved the phone to give a sweeping view of the table, deliberately lingering on the translucent shrimp dumplings and the milky soup. Look closely, Edgar. This is called cuisine. Gastronomy is broad and profound, you know? He couldn't help sounding a little smug. Shrimp dumplings, fish soup, and garlic ribs that aren't even in the frame. Sigh, even if I explain, you wouldn't get it. Your life is just sandwiches and baked potatoes. Edgar stared at the food on the screen, then at his sandwich, and went quiet. Who asked to see what you're eating? He snapped, changing the subject. Weren't you going on a trip? How many days leave do you have? Why are you still at home being corrupt? Are you going or not? Lynn hesitated. The smug smile froze for a moment. He glanced away, then cleared his throat. Cough. I'll definitely leave in a couple of days. Everything's planned. Norway. Norway. What a coincidence. Let's go together. P.S. Please leave a 5-star review. Also, brothers, Chapter 120 has been completely revised. 122. Let's go, Norway. Together? You're coming too? On the other side of the screen, Edgar chuckled. What a coincidence, right? My parents just got notice they have to go to the Norwegian Ministry of Magic for a 2-week official exchange, something about cross-border management of responsibilities. So, you know. He winked at Lynn, making his meaning perfectly clear. Lynn, expressionless, spat out 4 words, abusing public office for private gain. What nonsense! Edgar protested at once. This is called rationally utilizing social resources, optimizing summer arrangements, and, incidentally, conducting cross-cultural exchange and on-site research. My reason is solid enough that I even told my parents. So, are you taking me or not? It's not like one more person will make a difference. Fine, you can come. It's not like I can stop you. I'll go pack right now. That evening, Lynn and Edgar made detailed plans. Tomorrow, at the base of the tallest monolith in Vigeland Sculpture Park, Oslo, Lynn pointed at a map. Your parents' flu network access should let you travel directly to the Norwegian Ministry of Magic. It'll be convenient for you to get here from there. The next morning, Lynn returned to the familiar departure checkpoint at the British Ministry of Magic's International Flu Transfer Center. The attendant on duty happened to be the same person as last time. Name, destination, purpose? The attendant asked without looking up. Lynn, Oslo, Norway, tourism. Lynn handed over his travel authorization. The attendant took it, glanced through it, then looked up as if Lynn seemed vaguely familiar. He checked the document's authenticity with practiced efficiency, recorded Lynn's flu ID number and departure time in a huge ledger, and waved a hand. All paperwork in order. Zone C, Fireplace 7. Powder is self-service. Next. Everything proceeded smoothly. Lynn made his way to Zone C, Fireplace 7. A large hearth used for international flu transfers, roomy enough for several people. He scooped a handful of glittering flu powder from the small table, drew a steady breath, and clearly announced his destination. Norway. Magical Arrivals Hall. He tossed the powder into the flames. Emerald green fire surged up and enveloped him. A few seconds later, he stepped out of a fireplace at the Norwegian arrivals checkpoint. The hall on the other end felt different from the British ministry. Dark wood and pale stone, clean, hard architectural lines, and huge tapestries of Viking longships locked in battle with giant beasts. The air smelled of pine and crisp cold. Staff in dark blue and deep green robes moved about, their speech carrying a Norwegian lilt. After a quick registration at the arrivals counter, Lynn received a visitor badge to pin to his chest and headed straight out. The heavy wooden door opened to cool, pure Norwegian air. Unlike crowded London, the view here felt open, distant mountains and the outline of a fjord visible beyond the city. The sky was clear and blue. Lynn pulled out his flu ID and cast a disillusionment charm on himself. With a light spring, he shot into the air like an arrow, flying toward Vigeland Sculpture Park. The wind whistled past his ears as the city and green spaces rushed below. Free flight always felt exhilarating, especially on a sunny morning in a foreign land. He chose a secluded corner, landed silently at the edge of a grove in the park, and dispelled the charm. Morning tourists and locals on their exercises were beginning to arrive. Following their plan, he walked toward the center of the park and the famous monolith, a towering pillar spiraled with countless human figures. After waiting under the pillar for a while, Lynn finally spotted a familiar figure, Edgar, carrying a bulging backpack and craning his neck to look around, excitement written all over his face. Edgar. Lynn stepped up behind him and tapped his shoulder. "Whoa, you scared me!" Edgar spun around. When he saw Lynn, he relaxed, then gave him a once-over. "Oh ho, young Master Lynn, where's your luggage? Don't tell me you lost it in the flu network? Tsk, losing your bag on your first trip abroad is not a good omen." He drew out the last words theatrically. Lynn's smile froze. He rolled his eyes. "Can't you just wish me well? The luggage is with Dudu." "Tsk, traveling with your butler dog, you rich brat?" "Thanks for the compliment," Lynn said dryly. "Enough joking. Time's precious. First, we'll stroll through Vigeland Sculpture Park, soak up some Norwegian art, then head to the Viking Ship Museum. Let's go." He led the way through the park, past bronze and granite figures frozen in various poses. Edgar hurried to catch up. Time passed quietly. After visiting the Viking Ship Museum and picking up a few magical materials at Oslo's little market, it was already around 8. Hungry. Edgar rubbed his stomach. Once the excitement died down, his stomach started protesting. Lynn checked his watch. It was dinner time. Norwegian summer evenings came late, but hunger wouldn't wait. "Let's eat," Lynn said, patting Edgar's shoulder. "I'll take you to try some Norwegian specialties. Fair warning, some things might be very local. Don't throw up." "As long as it's not alive, I can try anything," Edgar thumped his chest. Using his prior research and the advantage of his language mastery, Lynn led Edgar down a few streets to a popular-looking restaurant. Opening the heavy wooden door, they were met with warm light and the smell of cooking. The place was busy, plainly dressed locals, and a few wizards identifiable by the handles of their flu tubes peeking out from under their robes and the occasional animated hand gesture. A waitress in a traditional embroidered apron greeted them with a friendly smile. "God kveld, good evening, gentlemen. Do you have a reservation?" She spoke Norwegian, but seeing 2 obvious foreigners, she switched into slightly accented but fluent English. "Good evening. No reservation. Table for 2? "Yes, please. No reservation," Lynn replied in Norwegian, his pronunciation impressively good. The waitress looked a little surprised. "This way, please. There's 1 table left." She led them to a window table with a street view and handed them menus. "Here are the menus. Drinks are on the reverse. Would you like to hear today's specials?" "We'll look first," Lynn said, handing the menu to Edgar across the table. "See what you want. Don't be shy." Edgar opened a menu decorated with moose antlers and rune patterns with eager anticipation. After 3 seconds, his enthusiasm froze into confusion and then a blank stare. He fumbled the menu, finger hovering over a few pictures that looked relatively safe: fish, meat. After a long, awkward struggle, he pushed the menu back to Lynn. Lynn tilted his head. "What's wrong? Nothing you want? Norwegian food is pretty diverse." "I don't know Norwegian." Edgar almost slammed the table in frustration. His face flushed and his voice came out through gritted teeth. "Not a single word." Lynn couldn't help laughing. Then, in flawless Norwegian, he rattled off a long order. "Vitar, rukt lax, smoked salmon to start, with sour cream and dill bread. For the main courses, 1 reinsdyrstek, roast reindeer, with lingonberry sauce, and 1 serving of lutefisk, lye-cured cod, with potatoes, pea puree, and bacon. Also a bit of turfisk dried, and a portion of melja, a stew of cod tongue and liver. That one is very special. 1 pot of fårikål, lamb and cabbage stew. For cheese, the specialty brunost, brown cheese, sliced and grilled. Finally, 2 rakerpa bread, shrimp sandwiches on rye bread, and 2 glasses of local mountain spring water to start, please." The waitress wrote everything down quickly, giving Lynn a few extra glances. It was rare for foreign tourists to order so many authentic traditional dishes so fluently, especially lutefisk and melja, which many outsiders find hard to stomach. Edgar couldn't understand the words, but seeing the waitress's expression and the long list, he knew Lynn hadn't held back. Edgar leaned in, half excited, half nauseous. "What did you order? Is there anything I can actually eat? That none of it's alive, right? No weird bugs?" "Don't worry," Lynn said, closing the menu and smiling innocently at Edgar. They're all the most authentic, famous Norwegian specialties, guaranteed to give you a true taste of the North. You ordered that lutefisk and that stew. The flavor, it's very unique, like a mix of caramel and cheese. You'll be thoroughly impressed. Thoroughly impressed, Edgar echoed weakly, feeling less reassured than the phrase intended. P.S. Guys, the author revised chapters 120 and 121 a bit, especially chapter 120. Interested readers can go back and take a look. Also, please leave 5-star reviews. Ors, I need to. The smoked salmon gleamed with a tempting reddish-orange oil. The roasted reindeer was paired with a deep red lingonberry sauce. The mutton stew smelled hearty. The slightly charred slices of brown cheese gave off a peculiar sweetness, and the shrimp sandwich looked simple but substantial. Yet Edgar's eyes were fixed on only 2 dishes. One was a grayish-white stew with a somewhat sticky texture and irregular chunks mixed in, mull cod-innard stew. The other was composed of nearly transparent, gelatinous slices, neatly arranged, lutefisk, liqueured dried cod. Compared to the rest of the table, these two simply looked unbearably challenging. Edgar stared at the cod-innard stew, then at the gelatinous lutefisk, and swallowed. He lifted his fork, hovered, and hesitated to bring it down. This stuff. Do people actually eat this? His voice betrayed obvious doubt, and his brows knitted. Lynn had been waiting for this. Without changing his expression, he used his fork to pick up a slice of the nearly transparent lutefisk. Under Edgar's watchful stare, he calmly ate it, chewed a few times, and kept a serene face, even giving a slight nod. Then he scooped a spoonful of the grayish stew and ate that with the same composure. It's pretty good. He set the spoon down and assessed with a calm tone. Traditional flavor, unique texture. Try it. No one except Lynn knew how much willpower that took. The lutefisk hit the mouth with a strange mix of lye and faint fishiness, slippery yet slightly elastic. The cod-innard stew delivered a heavy fishy smell and the peculiar soft bite of offal. Lynn relied almost entirely on the precise muscle control his perfect bodily control gave him to suppress the urge to spit it out, forcing himself to swallow and then to look like it was nothing. It was probably one of the high points of his acting career. Edgar watched his face intently, searching for the slightest flaw, but saw nothing. If Lynn ate it and said it was tasty, he wouldn't lie, right? Edgar muttered to himself, forked a tiny slice of lutefisk, closed his eyes, and put it in his mouth. A complex wave of lye, faint fishiness, and something else spread across his palate. He managed 2 chews before his brows knitted. He braced himself for the stew and scooped an even smaller spoonful. This one hit harder, an assault on his taste buds. Ugh! Edgar gagged, gulped down a big mouthful of water, and finally caught his breath. How did you eat that? Merlin, that taste, that texture. I can't handle it. Watching Edgar's expression shift, Lynn couldn't help it any longer and burst out laughing. Told you it was a specialty. You had to try it. All right, no more of that. Try the others. The reindeer and smoked salmon are good. There were, thankfully, normal dishes on the table. The roasted reindeer was tender and juicy, its gamey aroma balanced nicely by the sweet and sour lingonberry. The smoked salmon was fresh and rich. The brown cheese, caramelized from the heat, was sweet and unique with bread. The mutton stew was warming and flavorful, and the shrimp sandwich fresh and sweet. They finished a satisfying meal, though Edgar remained traumatized by the 2 specialties and refused to touch them again. Over the next few days, Lynn and Edgar traveled like ordinary backpackers, taking in Norway. From Oslo, they rode the scenic railway to Flåm, watching mountains, waterfalls, and deep fjords pass by. In Flåm, they boarded a cruise between the Narøyfjord and Orlandsfjord, 2 of the world's most beautiful fjords. In Bergen, they saw the colorful wooden houses of Bryggen. Up in Tromsø, inside the Arctic Circle, they experienced the midnight sun, the sky staying like twilight late into the night, rode the cable car up Mount Storsteinen for panoramic views, and visited the striking Arctic cathedral. Finally, they took a ferry to the Lofoten Islands, famous for dramatic scenery and fishing, and stayed in a roorbu, a converted fisherman's cabin full of coastal charm. On a fine morning in Lofoten, through the innkeeper's introduction, Lynn bought a sturdy little fishing boat from a local fisherman. They packed a lunch basket and hot drinks and set out to try real Norwegian sea fishing. The boat left the quiet harbor and headed for the open water. Edgar was ecstatic. This was his first time fishing at sea. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Soon Edgar felt a tug on his rod. He reeled it in eagerly and pulled a fish from the water. Haddock? Not bad, Lynn commented casually. Common along the Norwegian coast and good meat. I'll catch a bigger one than you in a bit. Before Edgar could even put that haddock in the bucket and catch his breath, his rod buzzed again. This time, he hauled up a slender fish. Pollock, Lynn continued his running commentary. Active near the shore, normal catch. Edgar huffed and cast again. He soon pulled in another sleek, fast swimmer with dark stripes. Mackerel, Lynn said. Good live bait for bigger fish. Every time Edgar caught something, Lynn offered a lukewarm remark. The problem was that Lynn's own rod hadn't budged since they left the harbor, silent as a decoration. Tsk. Edgar wiped his brow and squinted at Lynn, who still hadn't caught anything. He drew the words out teasingly. Someone hasn't caught a single fish yet. Do the fish here not recognize a Hogwarts fishing rod? Lynn's face darkened. He tightened his grip on the rod but didn't bother with a retort. Actions would speak. He switched baits, adjusted position, waited. Still nothing. Time drifted. The sun started to lower and the sea cooled. It was almost time to head back. Lynn, still fishing? Edgar began to stow his gear. Reel it in. We should head back. You're the Air Force commander today. Accept reality. We've got enough fish in the bucket. Let Dudu make a full fish feast tonight. Lynn glanced at his motionless rod, then at Edgar's full bucket, let out a long sigh, and started to wind the reel. Vroom! The rod suddenly transmitted an enormous, furious tug. It bent into a breathtaking arc, and the reel groaned under strain. Holy! I got a bite! And it's a big one! Lynn's frustration evaporated. He growled low, braced his feet against the gunwale, engaged his core, took the rod with both hands, and began fighting what was on the other end. Careful! Don't get dragged in. Edgar dropped what he was doing and moved to steady Lynn. It became a brutal tug of war. The creature made several powerful dives toward the deep, but Lynn hauled it back each time, gritting his teeth. After more than 10 minutes of battle, the force began to die. At the final reel, a silver-gray form broke the water in a shining arc, cutting through the sunset, and landed on the deck with a heavy thwack. It was a massive Atlantic salmon, over a meter long. Its tail still slapped the planks, and it must have weighed at least 40 pounds. Edgar stared at the behemoth in disbelief, then at Lynn's half-smug, half-arrogant face. Lynn walked over, nudged the salmon with his foot, looked up at the speechless Edgar, raised an eyebrow, and smiled in the most self-satisfied way. Heitzy, speak up. Edgar, Britain, London, Nocturne Alley. Where Norway had offered sunlight and fjords, Nocturne Alley was perpetually shaded and sinister. Narrow lanes ran between crooked, decrepit buildings whose windows displayed unsettling wares, shrunken heads, enormous black spiders, blood-stained cards, and parchments scratched with curses. The air was thick with mildew, dust, and a damp, musty tang. At night, the alley felt even darker. Two figures in long black hooded robes, faces hidden in shadow, stood before the crooked door of Borgin and Burke's. One reached out and pushed the creaking door open. Inside, the gloom deepened. Only a few oil lamps threw weak light over crowded shelves of strange merchandise, possibly cursed opal necklaces, hideous masks, rusty instruments of pain. The shop's current owner, a small, stooped wizard with sparse, greasy hair, stood with his back to the door, painstakingly wiping a cabinet with a dirty rag. When the bell above the door chimed, he continued without turning and called, "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Borgin and Burke's. How may I be of service? Cursed objects, rare collectibles, or some special services not easily found elsewhere? I have everything for the right price." He slowly turned, wearing a practiced smile as his small eyes flicked over the two hooded visitors. The lead figure stepped forward a half step. His face remained invisible in the hood's deep shadow. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse and low, eerily steady in the silent shop. "Mr. Borgin, I've heard much about you." There was no warmth in the voice. "I need 124, thousands of times, hundreds of times. Thousands of times, hundreds of times. I need an alchemical item that can track a specific person's whereabouts using memory. The more precise it is, and the smaller its range of error, the better." At the request, Borgin's eyebrows twitched almost imperceptibly. A sharp glint flashed behind his spectacles. He turned slowly, and instead of answering right away, he looked the hooded leader up and down with an appraising gaze, as if weighing the customer's needs against the depth of his purse. An alchemical item to track people by memory, Borgin repeated, his fingers tapping the counter in a soft tock-tock. That's a rather delicate request. If such a thing exists, it would be extremely complex to make, and its materials would be exceedingly rare. He bent and rummaged in an ancient cabinet under the counter. The door squeaked on old hinges. After a moment, he produced an object and set it on the worn wood. A brass basin, old and slightly crude, about a foot across, its rim darkened with green patina. The inner surface and bottom were carved with an intricate lattice of runes. It looked faintly like the pensieve in the Hogwarts headmaster's office. The memory-tracking basin, Borgin said, pride softening his voice as he wiped the rim with a clean bit of velvet. An alchemical masterpiece as old as any pensieve. They say it was the last work of an alchemical master from the Middle Ages. The method of making it has long been lost. The ones that remain are antiques. He lifted his eyelids to the black-robed figure and held up 3 fingers. Right now, in the entire British magical world, this is the last one in my possession. So, the price is 3,000 galleons. 3,000 galleons! The hooded man couldn't help the shock in his voice, even through the distortion that made it sound processed. Outrage. That was practically highway robbery, enough to keep an ordinary wizarding family comfortably for years. Make it cheaper, he rasped coldly. Apologies, Borgin said with a thin, insincere smile, spreading his hands. His tone left no room for bargaining. Small business. Scarcity determines value. You know what this is worth. If you find it unsuitable... He let the sentence hang, his gaze flicking to a few shadowy corners of the shop and to the oddly shaped rings on his fingers. Or if you'd like to try other methods, I'm ready to oblige. The threat was there, unstated. To have survived as long as he had in a place like Nocturne Alley, Borgin and Burks had to have protections and tricks, or he'd have been picked clean long ago. Forcible seizure would cost far more than 3,000 galleons, the hooded man realized. Silence stretched in the cramped shop until, as if his need outweighed his pride, he spoke with a dry evenness. I want to inspect the item. Be my guest. Borgin gestured, but shifted his stance and kept one hand casually tucked beneath the counter. The hooded man signaled a companion to step forward and inspect, but Borgin's eyes stayed fixed on him. You do it. Damn. He had seen through him. The hooded figure cursed inwardly. This old fox was slippery. After 2 seconds' hesitation, he stepped forward himself. He placed his hand on the cool brass rim, took a deep breath, and lowered his face into the faintly glowing runes at the basin's center. The silver runes flared, spinning like a little galaxy, a low hum filling the air. He concentrated, bringing to mind the image of his target, a young-looking wizard who had nonetheless fought with ruthless precision that night, the hint of a strange weapon bearing a peculiar symbol, 5 and an uncanny instinct for danger. The basin's surface churned, cleared, and then revealed a scene, the inside of Borgin and Burks, even showing Borgin himself. A line of shimmering text appeared, giving the shop's exact Nocturne Alley address. It worked, accurate and direct. The hooded man lifted his head, and the vision faded. No problem, he said. Even though the scene had shown Borgin, the old shopkeeper had likely warded himself against tracking, yet the basin still provided the exact address. The item was genuine and powerful. Reluctantly, the hooded man produced a leather pouch enchanted with an undetectable extension charm and pushed it across the counter. Borgin took it without bother, made no move to count the contents, and nodded in satisfaction. Payment and goods settled. May you find your target smoothly. Without more words, the 2 black-robed figures took the basin and melted back into the darkness of Nocturne Alley. Far away, deep in a remote British forest, inside a dilapidated stone fortress that served as their temporary base, torches burned in wall sconces and threw 2 long shadows on the flagstones. Old 7, the hooded leader, set the brass basin on a rough stone table. Try it. Find that brat. Old 7 stepped forward. Yes, boss. He lowered his head into the memory-tracking basin. The runes lit. He cleared his mind and tried to recall the boy, the flash of youth, the merciless techniques, the strange weapon with the 5 symbol, the sense that he seemed to anticipate danger. Fragments tumbled through his mind. The silver light swirled and flickered, as if processing the memories. But after several seconds, no scene resolved. The runes dimmed, and the basin fell silent, its surface blank as though nothing had happened. Old Seven jerked his head up, disbelief and confusion twisting his face. "Boss, the basin, it's completely blank." His voice carried panic. "How is this possible? My impression of that kid is very vivid." "Memory not clear enough?" the leader suggested. "No, I'm certain." Old Seven gritted his teeth. "I'll try again." He plunged his head back into the basin, forcing every scrap of attention toward Lynn, squeezing his mind for details. Again, the basin flickered a few times and then settled into total emptiness. No scene, no direction. Cold sweat bead at Old Seven's temples. The basin had worked on Borgin, so it wasn't broken. Why did it fail on that boy? "Weren't there two targets?" the leader asked. "Besides the kid with the 5, there was his companion. Try the other one." Relief brightened Old Seven's tone. "Right, there was another. He hadn't acted much that night, so the impression would be weaker, but it should be enough." He focused on the memory of the companion. This time, the basin reacted immediately. A clear scene appeared, a spacious villa with a garden, modern and comfortable in style. Beside the image, a line of silver text gave the address, down to the house number. "Boss, found it!" Old Seven barked. "The other kid's home. The address is crystal clear." The hooded leader leaned in, studying the villa and the address in the basin. The shadow beneath his hood seemed to tighten. "Good," he said slowly, straightening. "At least the 3,000 galleons weren't entirely wasted. Call Old 2, Old 3, Old 4, Old 5, and Old 6. We'll go pay them a visit together." "I'll make that kid know he messed with the wrong people," he hissed, fury sharpening his voice. "I'll make him watch as his home is destroyed, his loved ones tormented, and then I'll repay him 1,000-fold for what he did to us. I'll show him what true living hell is. There's no time to explain." July 14th, 1992, the 15th day of the 6th lunar month. It should have been an ordinary summer night. Clouds hung heavy over the moon, letting only a faint, diffuse glow fall across a quiet British villa district. In one of the modern houses, light spilled from a study window. For Ollie, the evening had been meant for tedious company work, parsing quarterly reports, trying to make sense of financial jargon at his father's insistence. Summer vacation at the Thorn House was far less free than being at Hogwarts. His mother had died when he was young. His father was a driven entrepreneur with high expectations. Their conversations always circled back to responsibility, the future, and the Thorn business. Ollie understood his father's intentions, but numbers and contract clauses felt alien and gave him a headache. Mr. Thorn was pointing at a spread of figures on the desk, explaining several key data points and what they meant for the company. Beep, beep. A phone in the room buzzed, its screen lighting with an incoming call. The sound cut sharply through the quiet study. Ollie's eyes were drawn to it. He forced himself back to the report. Mr. Thorne stopped talking, glanced at the buzzing phone, then at his son, whose attention had drifted. Something like a smile and a sigh moved across the father's serious face. "Answer it if you want. Probably one of your friends from Hogwarts," he said. "Don't chat too long. This data is important." The words were hardly finished before Ollie sprang up, grabbed the phone, and hit answer. The screen filled with Lynn's grinning face first, then Edgar pulling silly faces, and William in a corner, pushing up his glasses with a composed look. "Ollie, you should have seen it. I just caught a wild Atlantic salmon over 40 pounds up at the Lofoten Islands. Pure wild. That thing nearly dragged me into the sea." Lynn pantomimed the struggle for the camera. Ollie blinked at the screen, then managed dryly, "I didn't know." "Wild? That is impressive," William said, adjusting his glasses. "You bet," Lynn beamed, encouraged. "Let me tell you the whole thing. I was about to pack up thinking today was a bust. Then, vroom, the pull was massive. Honestly, at one point, For the next 10 minutes, Lynn spun his tale. Edgar chimed in with jokes and teasing, and William added the occasional calm, appreciative comment. Ollie listened with a small smile. Mr. Thorne stayed in the study, not returning to the report. Instead, he watched his son, framed by the lamplight in profile, so unlike the stiff boy who sat across the desk. For a moment, something like recognition softened his expression, as if he saw in Ollie a reflection of his own distant youth. Anyway, tonight Dudu will pan-sear some salmon steaks, Lynn concluded. I'll send pictures. You'll be jealous. See ya. See you at term, William said. Stay safe, Edgar added. The call ended. Ollie set the phone down, and after a pause, went back to the reports. Mr. Thorne cleared his throat and picked up where he'd left off. Ahem, these accounts receivable numbers, combined with Note 3, reflect our credit policy adjustments last quarter. Cash flow is strained now, but in the long run. Outside, the trees swayed in the night. 7 figures in black cloaks moved silently through the shadows and took up positions around the villa, forming a rough perimeter. One of them nodded to another. This is the place, he said in a low, eager voice. Their leader stood and glanced at the sky. The weather's about to change. As if on cue, the wind picked up, blowing the clouds away and revealing the full moon. Then 7 hoarse howls split the night. Awo! 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 Screams and shouts erupted from nearby houses. What is that sound? There's something out there. Look, a werewolf. Someone's turning into a wolf. Merlin's name was invoked, and residents scrambled to barricade doors and windows. Wizards nearby recognized the sound for what it was, werewolves, and a whole pack at that, appearing on a full moon night in a quiet neighborhood. Fear spread like wildfire. Inside the villa, Ollie was jolted fully awake by the howls. The study door burst open, and Mr. Thorne rushed in, still in his dressing gown. His face was white, eyes wide with shock and determination, and in his hand he gripped something that looked very much like a wand. Ollie? His voice was taut with urgency. He pushed aside a curtain to look out, dropped it, and his expression darkened. There are at least 5 or 6 werewolves out there. They've surrounded the house. He spun and seized Ollie's arm. You go now. Through the back door to the basement. I've set up protective wards there. They should hold for a while. I'll stall them. Ollie stumbled back, panic making his mind blank. Werewolves? Surrounded? His father was going to stay behind? Wasn't his father a muggle? How did he have something like a wand? The questions crowded his head, but panic wouldn't help. Instead of running straight to the back door, Ollie tore open his bedside drawer and grabbed 2 things, a brass key and a feather. He darted to his wardrobe and pressed the brass key into the center of its smooth door. The key made contact, and a ripple of faint light ran across the wood. A complex locking mechanism clicked, runes flared briefly, and then faded. He pulled the door open to reveal a hollow space about 3 cubic meters in size. Dad, no time to explain. Get in. He didn't wait for an answer. The werewolf's howls were closer now. He lunged into the wardrobe and pulled his father in with him. Ollie shut the door. The latch clicked, the brass key vanished from sight, and the cupboard returned to its ordinary outward appearance. 126. Be safe. Inside the 8, in the roomy dining area, a long table was piled with irresistible fish dishes, golden, crispy pan-fried salmon steaks, creamy fish head tofu soup, tender steamed cod, sour and spicy fish slices, and several new recipes. Dudu had been eager to try. Lynn and Edgar attacked the feast with abandon, cheeks greasy, collars forgotten, while their tens flashed as they frantically photographed the spread and each other's stuffed faces, planning to faithfully deliver the evidence to William and Ollie later. Dudu sat to the side, pristine in his tea towel attire, every movement precise. With knife and fork, he cut the fish into neat cubes, eating slowly and with impeccable table manners. Master has really improved today, actually catching fish instead of philosophizing over an empty bucket. Dudu is relieved, he thought. Lynn's hand reached for a piece of fried fish, then stopped. The smile froze on his face. He turned slowly and stared at Dudu's expressionless face. If you hadn't brought up my failed fishing, we could still be master and servant who get along. Caw-caw. A burst of gold-red flames erupted beside the table. Wuan appeared within the flames, urgency radiating from his wings. Master! Ollie is in danger. Location locked. Let's go! Lynn didn't hesitate. He shot up, not even stopping to explain to bewildered Edgar, half embedded in his meal. In one stride, he reached Wuan and placed a hand on the bird's burning wing. Caw-caw. A brighter flare of fire, and Lynn and Wuan vanished from inside the 8, leaving behind a stunned Edgar and Dudu, who continued eating as if nothing had happened. Ollie's home. Inside the wardrobe, Ollie and Mr. Thorne were huddled together. The fortin feather clenched in Ollie's hand was growing unbearably hot. Caw-caw! A ball of gold-red flame exploded in the cramped space. Mr. Thorne nearly cast a spell. The fire subsided, and Lynn stepped out, Wu-En perched on his shoulder, scanning the room. The three of them and the 14 stared at each other in the narrow enclosure. "Good evening, Mr. Thorne. What happened here?" "Wu-En told me you were in danger," Lynn asked. Mr. Thorne was too shocked for words. The reinforcement his son had summoned was his classmate? A boy maybe 13 or 14? And that bird, could it possibly be a phoenix? What were they handing out at Hogwarts these days? "There are werewolves outside. A lot. Be careful," Ollie managed. "Understood." Lynn nodded and patted Wu-En. "Wu-En, you stay here and protect them. I'll go out and see what's happening." Ollie swung the brass key and opened the wardrobe door again. Lynn slipped out and gently closed it behind him. The bedroom beyond was familiar but ruined. A musky stench, the dust of destruction, overturned furniture, torn curtains, moonlight pouring through a shattered window. Almost the instant he appeared, a low growl came from the doorway. A werewolf shadow filled the threshold, fur bristling, teeth bared, drool dripping, eyes fixed on Lynn. It sprang forward with a fetid gust. Lynn dodged nimbly. The werewolf's confident lunge missed, its body skidding against his clothes and crashing into the wall with a heavy thud. Avada Kedavra! Lynn's, 22, was already in his hand. A blinding green light erupted in the dim room and struck the creature squarely in the chest. The werewolf collapsed without a cry, sending up a cloud of dust. The battle was over almost as soon as it began. By the moonlight, Lynn saw the werewolf clearly and the grotesque scar across its chest. He remembered the forbidden forest, a full moon, Hagrid's giant crossbow bolt that had nearly pinned it to a tree. This was the captured werewolf that had escaped. Heavy footsteps and more threatening growls sounded in the hallway. "Awoo!" The commotion had drawn others. Lynn chose to stay. He moved to the more open center of the room and waited. The first werewolf smashed through the half-open door. Green light flashed again. Avada Kedavra! It fell. Crash! The second ripped through the doorframe. Lynn's 22 drew a line through the air. Sectum Sempra. A razor slice of force severed the beast's head. Blood sprayed and the headless body collapsed. The third, fourth, fifth, each that forced its way in, was dealt with in turn. In under 2 minutes, 5 werewolf corpses lay scattered across Ollie's floor. The metallic stench of blood made Lynn's nose wrinkle. He flicked his Y. Fiend fire licked from the tip, precisely covering each corpse. The flames burned with terrible heat. Flesh, bone, and fur blackened and disintegrated until, with faint crackling, only 5 small piles of ash remained. Lynn looked at the ashes with detached eyes. "Next life, if there is one, be more careful. Don't provoke the wrong people," he murmured. Crack! A flare of fire and a figure stepped out, silver hair, long beard, half-moon spectacles. Dumbledore had arrived, Fawkes on his shoulder. He took in the ruined room, then the piles of ash at Lynn's feet. His voice was soft, with an edge of irony. "Burned? Again?" Lynn rose from the chair and answered like it was obvious. "Good evening, Principal. Yes, burned." Dumbledore was silent for a heartbeat, then waved his 22 gently. "Scourgify." A gust of wind swept the ashes away, leaving the bedroom pristine again except for the damaged furniture and the broken window. Lynn blinked, mildly taken aback. "Principal, aren't you a bit too practiced?" Dumbledore looked toward the closed wardrobe. "Ollie and his father." "They're safe, inside the cabinet," Lynn said, pointing. Dumbledore regarded him for a moment and then nodded. "Good. Well done, Lynn. Quick reaction. There are still 2 werewolves causing trouble in the nearby streets. The Aurors have surrounded them. You, stay here. Do not go out. Be careful." With that, he did not linger. In a swirl of flame and with Fawkes, Dumbledore was gone. Lynn stared at the empty room. Then a pang of regret creased his face. 2 left? If he hadn't waited in the room earlier, he should have gone out to find them. Now he'd left survivors. Lynn scolded himself silently. "This is unacceptable. Eradicate the evil completely. Where is your resolve?" He sighed, walked to the wardrobe and knocked. "Ollie, Mr. Thorne, it's safe. The principal was here. The remaining werewolves will be dealt with by the Aurors. Come out." The cabinet door opened. Ollie and Mr. Thorne stepped into the ruined bedroom, still pale and stunned. Mr. Thorne looked around at the absence of any living thing in the room, and then at Lynn, standing unharmed but a little exasperated, and let out a long, complicated sigh. What a mess this has been. These werewolves, why did they have to show up here, of all times? Mr. Thorne's face was ashen. He stared blankly toward the street, where aurors were slowly bringing the chaos under control, and muttered to himself in a voice so low it was almost a groan. The phrasing, of all times, show up here, struck Lynn's ears. It didn't sound like the words of a random victim. It sounded like someone who'd been through something deliberate. And the way he said, "these werewolves," suggested familiarity, even the feeling of being targeted. Lynn's curiosity flared, but he knew better than to prod at an elder's wounds. He kept his head down, pretending not to hear, and his eyes drifted to the cracked window frame as he considered whether he should fix it. Ollie, however, couldn't hold back. The shock and so many questions throbbed in his chest. "Dad," his voice came out dry. You're a wizard too? You always have been?" Charles stiffened, as if some painful memory had been wrenched open. He turned slowly to his son, said nothing for a long beat, then nodded. He gave no explanation. The silence between them felt heavy and final. At that moment, there was a slight disturbance in the doorway. Albus Dumbledore materialized back in the messy bedroom, having apparently finished dealing with things outside. He had heard the question and seen Charles's nod. Dumbledore's lips twitched as if he would speak, but his attempt dissolved into a soft, aching call. "Charles, you!" Charles spun on him. The tight control he'd maintained until now unraveled into a furious, cold rage. "You are not welcome here." Each word was hard as flint, spat through clenched teeth, meant to drive him away. Dumbledore fell silent. After a painful pause, he managed, in a voice full of regret, "I'm sorry." The words were tender. Charles's eyes flooded red, and his voice cracked into something like a roar. "What good is your sorry? Can your sorry bring Joan back? Can it turn back time? Can it undo what she went through? Get out, now. Get out of my house. You are not welcome here. Never." Joan. The name hit like a physical blow. Dumbledore opened his mouth and closed it. He could say nothing more. Without another word, he vanished as quietly as he had appeared. Lynn and Ollie exchanged a look. Lynn's eyes asked, "Should I go?" Ollie glanced at his phone, nodded once. "Go on. I'll text you later." Lynn left quickly. Left in the bedroom, only Ollie and his father remained. Outside, the muffled sounds of aurors escorting residents and cleaning up drifted in. At last, Ollie asked, quieter than before, "Dad, what exactly happened between you and Headmaster Dumbledore and Mom?" Charles swayed, his face folding with memory. "You're surprised I'm a wizard, aren't you?" His voice was rough. He didn't answer directly, but instead let memory do it for him. "Your mother, Joan, came from an old pure-blood family. She was sorted into Slytherin, brilliant, proud, and beautiful like a morning star." He smiled, briefly and sadly, at the memory. "We met at Hogwarts. She had grace and confidence. I was a Hufflepuff from an ordinary family, nothing special." His tone hardened. "Then you know whose forces began to sweep across the whole wizarding world. Joan hated that pure-blood supremacist nonsense. Her pride was earned, not inherited." He closed his eyes. "Dumbledore recruited her. He said the Order of the Phoenix needed someone on the inside, that her background would make the perfect cover. He told her it would protect people, that it would help end the war sooner. He promised to keep her safe." Charles's voice rose, edged with bitter disbelief. She believed him. She was so brave, she agreed to do it. To go close to that devil. She carried out the mission. She passed the intelligence on. And then a traitor in the Order betrayed us. He began to shake. "Our safe house, the one Joan and I hid in, was discovered. It wasn't Death Eaters who came. It was a pack of crazed werewolves." The words choked him. He couldn't finish in a steady voice. The night replayed in flashes, the smell of smoke, Joan's resolute face as she pushed him away, the blood and the snarls. "Dumbledore arrived too late. He saved me. But Joan, she..." Ollie didn't need the rest. Everything fell into place. His father's terror of werewolves, his years pretending to be a muggle and keeping his past tucked away, his silent hatred for the wizarding world that had cost him the woman he loved. And most of all, why he could never forgive Dumbledore for putting Joan in harm's way and for failing to stop it. Afterward, back at his trunk, Lynn's phone rang. Ollie's voice on the line was unnaturally calm, as he recounted what his father had told him. Between them hung a long, rare silence, the small hiss of static and the sound of two people breathing. Words felt inadequate. Lynn finally said, dry and soft, "I'm sorry. If you need anything, call me anytime." 128, Valentine Theater Company. Lynn and Edgar lingered in the Lofoten Islands for a few more days. Over those last few days, Edgar had sunk into a state of blissful frustration. He'd been fishing so nonstop, he felt he might actually get sick of it. Every cast brought almost immediate activity. Sea bass, cod, flounder, taking turns on the line until he was exhausted and grinning like a fool. He even learned a few processing spells from the local wizard fisherman, which made him annoyingly efficient. Lynn's luck, by contrast, stayed stubbornly dismal. Aside from that 40-pound Atlantic salmon on the first day, his catches for the rest of the trip were pitiful. He'd sit half the morning staring at a glassy sea, or else the float would bob, and he'd haul in something smaller than a worm. "It's strategic catch and release to protect fishery resources," Lynn said, tossing yet another finger-long minnow back into the water without a shred of embarrassment. "Besides, this thing couldn't even get stuck in your teeth." Edgar, holding a hefty cod, grinned until his eyes nearly disappeared. "Right, Master Lynn is right. Sustainable development. Hey, should we have Dudu make it into soup or grill it tonight?" Lynn quietly looked away, his dignity taking one small hit after another. He and Dudu were in the trunk processing Edgar's spoils. Dudu moved with practiced speed, using magic to clean and fillet the fish while muttering under his breath. Dudu thought Master brought a friend to relax, but it seems to be an aquatic processing plant. Master's friend is very enthusiastic about fishing, but where are Master's catches? Lynn forced a helpless smile and glanced toward Edgar, who was currently wrestling with a squid tentacle and stuffing dried fish from the snack basket into his mouth as he muttered, "Mph, I'll call and ask Mom." A little way off, he fished his phone from his pocket and dialed his mother, Anna. Beep, beep, beep. Lynn continued working with Dudu, not meaning to eavesdrop, but Edgar's loud voice drifted back on the line. "Hello, Mom. It's me, Edgar. Yeah, we're having a great time in Norway. Lynn? Oh, him. Same as always, except for that lucky catch on the first day. I mean, he showed off on day one, then it's been protecting the fishery ever since. Ha ha!" The knife in Lynn's hand paused. "So, when am I coming back? With you guys or what? You and Dad are going to Iceland to see the Northern Lights, and you're incidentally going to check on magical creature protections there? I'm your biological son, right? Isn't that a bit too incidental?" Fine, fine. I'll tell Lynn. Have fun and bring me a souvenir." The call ended. Edgar returned, beaming too brightly, and clapped a hand on Lynn's shoulder. "I just checked. My parents are tied up for a while. Apparently some urgent business. Don't worry, I'll come with you back to Britain." Dudu stopped slicing and peered at Edgar with exaggerated solemnity. "Edgar, Dudu heard your mother say they're going to Iceland to watch the Northern Lights?" Edgar's smile froze, and for a moment the expression slid onto Lynn's face like a perfectly matched mask. The next morning, they packed their bags. They didn't plan to rush back through the flu network at the checkpoint. Instead, they opted for a more leisurely route, the North Sea Ferry, for wizards returning to Britain. In truth, it was mostly Edgar's idea. Lynn had taken it before and thought it was pleasant enough. The pier was cleverly disguised with illusion charms and muggle-repelling enchantments. As they neared it, the clamor of voices and the smell of salt filled the air. While they searched for the boarding gate, Lynn overheard a cluster of excited wizards nearby. "I heard the Valentine troupe has an extra performance at the port tonight. The schedule's tight, but it's worth trying. They never repeat their shows. My daughter still can't stop talking about that mooncalf ballet from last time. I wonder what magical creatures they'll bring this time. Puffskeins doing acrobatics, maybe." A stage show combined with magical creatures snapped something awake in Lynn. He drifted closer and caught one wizard lowering his voice. "Insider tip, my nephew runs errands for the troupe. He said there might be a big fellow in this performance, but they're keeping it a complete secret. Nothing will be announced until the show starts." Now Lynn was fully interested. He nudged Edgar, who was squinting at the ferry route map. "Don't rush onto the boat tonight. There's a magical creature stage show. Want to go? Could be fun." Edgar's eyes lit up. Stage play? Are there fights, singing, dancing? We'll find out. It's early. Consider it broadening our horizons. As night fell over Bergen Harbor, a massive structure hovered above the water, the Valentine Troops' mobile stage. It wasn't a ship in the traditional sense, but a giant circular arena edged with flickering runes and a faintly mechanical design. They paid 2 galleons for tickets and boarded a small, flag-bedecked ferry that moved without oars toward the floating marvel. Up close, the interior was far more spacious than it had looked from the quay, clearly using undetectable extension charms. Tiered seating ringed a central circular performance area, already half filled with expectant spectators. The crowd buzzed like a Roman Colosseum awaiting spectacle. Right in the middle of the stage sat a huge hemispherical shield, black as night, completely concealing whatever lay beneath. Not even a silhouette could be made out. "They've covered it well," Edgar observed. "Good things are worth waiting for," Lynn said, examining the cover. "Spoilers ruin the fun." They found their seats. Edgar produced a bag of fizzing Whizbees from his pouch, ready for the show. Just as the audience murmurs rose to a peak, all the magical light orbs over the stage abruptly went out. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. A single spotlight sprang to life, illuminating the space before the mysterious black dome. Within its beam, gold and silver motes of magical dust swirled and drifted down. A wizard in a scarlet velvet suit and top hat, with 2 meticulously groomed little mustaches, strode into the light. "Ladies, gentlemen, colleagues of the magical world, good evening." 129. I'm overloaded. Welcome to the Valentine Troupe, the special night of Wonderland wandering. I am your guide, Felix Valentine. Valentine bowed so low his top hat nearly touched the floor, earning a ripple of applause and whistles. In the vast, boundless world of magic, how many breathtaking creatures hide, and how many unknown legends await. Tonight, he flicked his wand dramatically toward the black dome behind him. We will lift a corner of the curtain and show you a stage written in light and shadow. Ripples ran across the surface of the protective shield as he spoke. His smile widened. First, we'll warm up with a little starlight for tonight's feast. The tip of his wand erupted in silver motes that arced toward the audience like a meteor shower. The points of light silently detonated in the air and unfolded into countless graceful, luminous starlight jellyfish. Long, trailing tentacles drifted as if swimming through the air above the crowd, sprinkling silver dust like mist and smoke until the whole viewing area was bathed in soft light. A chorus of delighted gasps and murmurs rose from the audience. Lynn watched them float overhead and thought, transfiguration plus light and shadow enchantments, impeccable craft. Beside him, Edgar had been completely absorbed. His mouth hung open, and the fizzing Whizbees in his hand had melted half-forgotten before he remembered to eat them. The jellyfish dissolved into the air, and Valentine drew everyone's attention back to center stage. Now, ladies and gentlemen, hold your breath for a moment, because the stars of tonight are about to appear. They are not tame pets. They are creatures where wildness and magic coexist. First, with a thunderous round of applause, the master of the skies from the eye of the storm in North America, Count Lightning. The black hemispherical barrier retracted rapidly from above, revealing the interior. A gigantic bird, swathed in blue feathers and much larger than a hippogriff, perched on a metal stand in the center of the stage. A collar around its neck was etched with intricate lightning runes. A thunderbird! By Merlin, it's really a thunderbird. Look at the lightning, so cool. Count Lightning, the name fits. The audience erupted into louder cheers and standing ovations. Valentine beamed, and matching the sky's master, direct from the deep volcanoes of Peru, a child of fire and venom, Venom Lord. The barrier melted away. Behind and to the side of the Thunderbird, a Peruvian viper-toothed dragon coiled inside a massive cage. Its body gleamed with smooth copper scales. Viscous venom dripped from its fangs, sizzling onto an ore tray below. A metal collar with fang motifs circled its neck. The 2 creatures sharing the stage sent the theater into another wave of excitement. Please be patient while our stars rest and gather their strength. The main act is about to begin. Lights cut out. For a few seconds, the theater went black. Bang! Colored spotlights stabbed through the darkness and crossed the stage, revealing a set. Valentine resumed his narration. Long, long ago, in the snow-covered mountains of Norway, there lived a beautiful and kind princess. Lynn made a sour face at the cliché. A thunderbird and a dragon for a fairy tale about a prince, princess, and wicked dragon? It was hardly unrelated. If anything, it was brilliantly commercial. Edgar, settled in his seat, watched raptly and shot a teasing look at Lynn, as if to say, "What's wrong with enjoying it? Why complain when you can watch the special effects, the magic, the creatures fighting?" Lynn smirked and let it go. The production was childish, but visually it was spectacular. The Thunderbird's wing beats wove tiny bolts of lightning into shimmering roads and bridges in the air. The dragon's poisonous fire carved out the jagged darkness of an evil lair. The plot hurtled toward its engineered climax. With Count Lightning's help, the prince crossed the storm road and found the lair occupied by Venom Lord. The battle began. Under Valentine's melodramatic narration and swelling music, Count Lightning cried out and sparks crackled. Its 6 wings unfurled and electric serpents darted among the feathers. The dragon, provoked, arched, its chest cavity glowing. A low growl rolled up through its throat. "For glory and love, charge, Count Lightning!" the actor playing the prince bellowed. The Thunderbird beat forward, releasing a beam of lightning far thicker and brighter than before. A deafening clap accompanied it. The dragon answered in kind, spewing a torrent of flames laced with dark green venomous mist. Lightning and venomous fire slammed together in midair. Boom! The light and heat exploded outward. The front rows gasped, some shielding eyes and ears. Sparks rained down onto the specially prepared stage floor with dry crackles and bursts of smoke, while light and shadow illusions amplified every flash into a blinding spectacle. Edgar whooped and slapped Lynn's arm. "That was amazing! These are the real deal!" Lynn watched the thunder and fire collision and felt something else at the back of his mind, a familiar prickling sensation. My overload, he thought. The fight intensified. The Thunderbird summoned denser, smaller bolts to harass the dragon. The dragon replied with poisonous breath and sweeping tail strikes. Each clash spat out more sparks that flew everywhere. Both creatures picked up shallow wounds and singes, but neither seemed to notice. Smoke thickened until the prince vanished into a haze. The thunder grew louder and took on a different edge. Crack! A thunder sound unlike the staged effects rolled from the horizon. Rumble! The stage lights began to flicker, and the background music developed a harsh static undertone. Both beasts grew visibly agitated. The Thunderbird's cries turned raw with anger. The dragon's roars went frantic. The collars at their necks pulsed with a blinding red light. Wow, this is incredible, as you'd expect of magical creatures, such large-scale weather and fire effects at such a young age. Edgar's excitement climbed even higher. Lynn said nothing. When 1:30, they stole the young one, and now the old one is here. A roar, far more violent than the one during the earlier performance, bellowed from the night sky beyond the theater's protective shield. It cut through the barrier and instantly drowned out everything on stage. A terrifying jet of toxic flame, several times thicker than the Venom Lord's, darker, almost black, slammed into the outer shield. The troops' safety effects were flimsy against a full-strength strike from a truly enraged adult Peruvian viper tooth. Crack! Boom! The outer shield shattered. A large hole melted through it, and pungent sulfur and deadly poison poured in. The thick stream of fire whistled toward the spectator stands, where Lynn and Edgar were seated. Seats warped and groaned under the heat before the flames even reached them. Torrential impact! Lynn reacted the instant the toxic flame breached the protection. He pointed his wand, and a thick water dragon burst from its tip, meeting the toxic fire head-on. Water and flame hissed and screamed, vaporizing with a deafening roar. Massive clouds of steam mixed with toxic smoke, forming a choking fog that cut off sight. The poisonous gas, however, wasn't neutralized by water. It spread with the steam, and the acrid smell made nearby wizards cough and burn. While keeping up the water torrent, Lynn pulled a second wand with his other hand, and without looking, waved it at himself and Edgar. 2 transparent bubbles sealed over their heads, filtering the poisoned air. Edgar shuddered as the attack became frighteningly real. He dropped his bag of snacks. Cool, clean air filled his lungs, and he went pale. This isn't a show effect, he managed, voice muffled inside the bubblehead charm. Crutch, let's go! Lynn didn't even call him by name. He grabbed Edgar's arm while maintaining the water torrent. Apparition. Side-along apparition. Pop. The two figures vanished within the toxic fog. Almost immediately after they disappeared, the flames tore through the stand where they had been. Seats and decorations became burning charcoal. The toxic fire spread, triggering screams and chaos. Thunderclouds gathered violently overhead. Crack! More than a dozen lightning bolts, as thick as buckets, struck from the clouds, not at the stage, but at the panicked spectators trying to flee or cast shields. Whoever, or whatever, was sending the lightning-hated wizards as a class. Ah, Merlin! Protego, quick! Shield charms shattered among screams. Several wizards who couldn't react in time were struck, collapsing as their bodies smoked. Screech! A bird's cry mixed with thunder as a massive thunderbird, twice the size of the Earl Lightning on stage, its wingspan immense and body wreathed in violent, dazzling electricity, emerged from the clouds. Its gaze fixed on the troop members below. It roared toward the stage, and Lynn's language mastery let him understand. Damned thieves! Filthy wizards! Give me back my child! From the breach in the shield came another furious dragon roar. Roar! Give me back my child! The Valentine troupe wasn't a legitimate performance group at all, but a large-scale poaching and smuggling den in disguise. They'd stolen a young creature, and now the parents had come. Lynn understood instantly. He and Edgar reappeared on a lookout tower at the edge of the stage that the flames and lightning hadn't reached. Lynn shoved the trembling Edgar into a trunk. Go inside and hide. Edgar scrambled in. The lid closed. Lynn shrank the trunk and tucked it into his robes, then turned back to the battlefield. On stage, the scripted prince and princess routine had been abandoned. Valentine's face went ugly as he watched a killing curse picked up by a Thunderbird-created whirlwind and thrown back, slamming into one of his lackeys who'd been used as a human shield. Stop hiding! Get out here! Grab your gear! He roared down into the wings. They took the young and brought the old. Fine, let's make this an even bigger haul. Capture those two adults and we can make 10 times, no, 100 times more. Trapdoors slammed open, and 7 or 8 men who hadn't appeared earlier lunged out. They weren't actors, different clothes, fierce eyes, quick movements, poacher guards, or combat wizards. They raised their wands without hesitation, aiming at the Thunderbird and the dragon above. Avada Kedavra, Cruciatus, Expelliarmus, Confringo. Spells of many colors shot into the sky. The Thunderbird stirred the thunderclouds and answered with denser lightning while nimbly dodging the killing curses. The dragon, enraged by blasting curses, spat even more frenzied toxic flame. The Venom Lord and Earl Lightning on stage, provoked by their parents' arrival and the fierce battle, struggled wildly. Their collars flashed red as if on the verge of snapping. Green and red light, lightning, toxic flame, and exploding fire braided and collided in a chaotic storm. Spell screams, creature roars, collapsing scenery, and fleeing crowds blended into a hellish scene. Lynn hovered above it all, watching the melee with casual interest. Tsk, tsk. This is much more exciting than a stage play, he murmured. Ding! A system notification chimed. Quest issued, knock them all down. The current chaos arose from greed and poaching, enraged parents, black-hearted thieves, a chaotic battlefield. As an upright wizard who upholds the 5 stresses, 4 beauties, and 3 loves, you should prevent the situation from worsening, avoid more innocent casualties, and make those responsible pay. The most efficient way is to persuade everyone involved in the battle and creating chaos, regardless of whether they are human or animal. Quest reward, Hand of Calling Thunder, can condense lightning for precise or area attacks, can also influence weather on a small scale to create thunderstorm zones. Quest reward, Venom Gland Assimilation, effect, grants the ability to generate venom glands that can be autonomously regulated, secreting customized venoms of various potencies, immune to your own and most common toxins. His primary target was obvious, Felix Valentine. The poacher leader, disguised as a performer, had been directing the fight through a ring of underlings while sneaking toward the cages of magical creatures, clearly planning to run off with the goods if things turned sour. Avada Kedavra. Lynn seized the opening and launched a killing curse. The green bolt tore through the air toward Valentine's back. Valentine's instincts were razor-sharp. He saw it coming and lunged sideways, casting backward without missing a beat. Accio! A half-man-high rockery stone from the edge of the stage flew up and slammed into the curse, taking the blast. The green light vanished into the stone. Cracks spidered across the rock's surface, and then it exploded into dust. Valentine, covered in debris from a clumsy roll, had at least bought himself a moment's life. Damn it! Who dares? Casting a killing curse without any care. You trying to take me down with them? He spat, scrambling to his feet and scanning for his attacker. You're reactive for a poacher. Lynn's surprise was mild. He didn't slow. With two wands in hand, he was a blur. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Spells came from different angles, forcing Valentine to dodge and parry constantly. The Thunderbird's lightning overhead, the dragon's venomous flame in the distance, and the chaotic magic from other poachers compressed his dodging space to the limit. He bounded about like an animal, cursing, trying to watch Lynn's blades while also avoiding heavenly punishment and hellfire, a total wreck. Let's see how long you can keep jumping, Lynn muttered and quietly activated stagnant gaze. Valentine, trying to block a lightning strike with a shield charm, suddenly felt his body go heavy, his limbs leaden, his thoughts like wading through a swamp. His simple block came half a beat late, and that half beat was all Lynn needed. Cruciatus! A crimson beam shot from Lynn's wand, its tip tainted with the constant hum of the immortal curse. This time, Valentine could summon nothing to intercept. The beam struck his chest dead on. Ah! Ah! Valentine's curses turned into raw screams. He writhed and rolled, his fingers clawing into the stage planks, nails shredding. For a moment, he couldn't move or cast, a living target. A bolt of lightning slammed nearby, the exploding electric snakes enveloping him, and at nearly the same instant, a clump of dark green, venomous flame splashed over him. Sizzle and hiss filled the air, the reek of charred flesh mixed with corrosive venom. Valentine's screams cut off. His curled form stopped twitching, blackened and smoking. Where venom ate away at him, the flesh bubbled and melted. Lynn glanced at the ruin without emotion. This wasn't as quick as a killing curse, he thought, but for Valentine, it no longer mattered. Valentine's death made little ripple. The rest of the poachers were either locked into battle with the enraged adult Thunderbird above or trying to restrain the dragon. They had no time to notice the leader's end. The brawl on stage remained brutal. Push harder! This old dragon's starting to tire. It's almost done, shouted one group. 5 or 6 poachers huddled together, grit and fear on their faces as they struggled to withstand the dragon's venomous breath and crushing physical blows. Hold steady. When it's exhausted, bind it with powerful binding charms. Live ones fetch more, another replied greedily. I'll help, a voice called from behind. The poachers whirled. An unfamiliar young man had appeared among them, a friendly smile on his face that did not belong at all. Torrential impact! Lynn flicked his wand, this time folding the immortal curse quietly into the stream. A high-pressure jet of water slammed into the hastily erected shields and defenses. The rushing torrent overwhelmed the barriers. The curse's influence seeped through and left them sluggish and weak. Ah! Pfft! Watch out! Their line collapsed. Screams rose as poachers were hurled aside, formations broken, protective spells shattered. Kid, you'll die for that. Ugh! One poacher, already scraping himself up, raised his wand to retaliate, but a sudden heat followed by cold numbness crawled through him. The dragon, their suppression broken, took its chance and exhaled a sweeping blast of venomous flame. Those exposed were incinerated. Screams cut out into crackles and the stench of charred flesh and molten hide. Only a few melted remains and the sickening smell were left. Roar! The dragon bellowed, furious. It locked onto Lynn, the instigator. To it, every wizard on the stage that had imprisoned its child deserved to die. Another stream of venomous flame leapt toward him. Lynn shot up into the sky like a cannonball. What are you following me for? Will you ever quit? He yelled as he twisted and turned through the night air, dodging the dragon's persistent pursuit. The beast was stubborn. Behind him, the Thunderbird's roars echoed in fury. At the right moment, Lynn made a sharp right turn, letting a single flare of venom graze his heels. A thunderous sound swept the stage as broken boards, stones, and scavenged metal, all the wreckage from the earlier fight, were gathered and molded into shape. In an instant, a massive, inverted bowl descended with the weight of a mountain and slammed down, covering the dragon that had chased him into the center of the stage. Protego totalum, pax amulatum, firmus corpus. Lynn didn't stop. A string of reinforcement and sealing spells stamped themselves onto the stone-formed bowl. Bang! Bang! Boom! The trapped dragon thrashed and roared inside. The bowl trembled under the onslaught, its imprisoned fury muffled into the cage of rubble and charmwork. The commotion finally snagged attention. The remaining poachers tangled with the Thunderbird, and the Thunderbird itself turned to look. As smoke thinned, they saw a dust-covered black-haired youth standing casually beside the giant stone bowl. Their leader and the other group were silent. An uneasy quiet fell over the battlefield, pierced only by muffled thuds from within the bowl and the distant sigh of the sea breeze. Lynn glanced at the hovering Thunderbird, then at the few poachers on the ground, whose expressions had shifted from anger to fear and confusion. He smiled, a little sheepish. Hello? Shall we continue? No, where the hell did you come from? Snarled a scarred poacher, cursing, his wand snapping toward Lynn. Avada Kedavra. Lynn's reply was simpler. The green flash came and was gone. The scarred man's words froze on his lips. He toppled backward, dead. Anyone else want to mouth off? Try me again. Lynn flicked his wand calmly. Fear and panic ignited in the last poachers and stirred the Thunderbird's hatred into a frenzy. Kill him! Avenge the boss! Spells and lightning surged at Lynn. Explosions and electric snakes stitched the air. But Lynn moved like a feather in a gale. Peter's jolt warned him of lethal strikes, and perfect bodily control let his body perform impossible evasions in tight spaces. He dodged fatal green bolts and heavy lightning, occasionally parrying lesser spells with shields. Expelliarmus! Petrificus Talis, Avada Kedavra. Lynn's counterattacks were precise and merciless. His twin wands flashed in alternating rhythm, finding gaps in defenses or the pauses when one foe's strength lagged and another's hadn't yet formed. The immortal curse woven into his attacks made even simple obstacle charms hard to dispel, constantly nagging. The fight didn't last long. With crashes and bursts, the last two poachers were struck. One turned to dust, the other burned to ash. On the stage, the only hostile left was the adult Thunderbird, now sprawled on the boards with its three huge wings limp, its feathers singed and shed, its body bruised and scorched. It still tried to rise. Faint electric light danced in the clouds, but it moved slowly. It stared at Lynn, then kept glancing anxiously back toward its trapped chick in the distance. Lynn dispelled the protective wards around him and walked calmly to the center, toward the caged Earl Lightning and the Venom Lord. Passing the exhausted Thunderbird, he stopped, looked up, and without warning, let out a theatrical roar. Strike? Weren't you fierce just now? Why aren't you striking? Out of power? The Thunderbird flinched. It didn't so much surrender as have no strength left to fight. I yield, my child, it seemed to say, breath ragged. That's more like it. Lynn smirked and flicked his wand. Stupefy. A gentle, stunning spell hit the Thunderbird on the head. It had nothing left to resist. Its eyelids drooped and it slid into deep sleep. For the first time since the chaos began, the battlefield fell utterly silent, save for the muted pounding from inside the stone bowl and the soft sigh of the sea wind. Ding! Mission complete. Rewards issued. Done. Lynn nodded, then, as if remembering something, squatted down by the sleeping Thunderbird. He fumbled at the base of one relatively intact wing and gave a sharp tug. Rip. A handful of long feathers crackled with tiny electric sparks as he plucked them. He stuffed them casually into his pocket. Tsk, quality's a bit poor, but they'll do. Alchemical reagents or Wuan's nest lining, he muttered. Satisfied, he clapped his hands and approached the cages holding Earl Lightning and the Venom Lord. Bang, bang, bang! On the stage, the Thunderbird Earl Lightning and the Dragon Venom Lord, freed for the moment from the theatrical script, were suddenly seized by a stark, panicked restlessness. They battered their metal perches and the specially reinforced bars of their cages, trying desperately to break free. The red lights on the metal collars around their necks, engraved with lightning bolts and fangs, began to flash with an unprecedented, frantic intensity. Some preset control program had clearly activated, trying to force their agitation into submission. Sk! Lynn frowned and stepped closer. Stupefy, he said twice. Both titled creatures dropped unconscious. The collar's frantic flashing died away and returned to a steady standby glow. Much quieter, Lynn murmured. He stowed his wand and inspected the collars. The metal was etched with a tangle of complex runes. Let's see, he said, drawing the wand again and probing a lock. Defindo. A line of cutting light and the lock sprang open. Lynn removed the collar, weighed the heavy metal ring in his hand, then began to examine it. Whoa, he raised an eyebrow. That's nasty. The core's a variant of Imperio, but there's more emotional pacification, pain suggestion, even suppression of defensive magic. Genius and vile. He understood then why the two creatures had seemed so inexplicably compliant during the performance. The collars didn't just force specific actions, they constantly exerted mental influence, quashing rebellious thoughts and amplifying obedience. Lynn snorted and slipped the collars into his pockets. Evil little devices, he said quietly, but useful. He thought of future opportunities. He'd take them back, research them, improve them. Perhaps he might want to encourage an uncooperative beast to cooperate someday. With the trouble solved and the prize collected, he didn't linger. With a soft pop of air, Lynn apparated away from the wrecked stage. About half an hour later, dense whooshes filled the night sky as a fleet of brooms descended. Wizards in Norwegian ministry uniforms and Auror gear swept across the auditorium from all directions, summoned by fleeing audience members and alarmed colleagues, though they arrived slower than the urgency of the scene deserved. Leading the group, a tall, thin man carrying a battered case landed first and hurried to the center of the devastation. His gaze locked on the huge, motionless Thunderbird, and his face crumpled with worry. Newt Scamander dropped his case and crouched to examine the bird, his eyes quickly sweeping the ruined stage. Scorch marks, splintered wood, and pockmarks from explosions scarred the set. The air hung heavy with a harsh, chemical tang. Nearby, a dragon lay trapped in a magically reinforced giant stone bowl, low thuds and heavy breathing coming from within. Two more creatures lay unconscious in their cage racks. Scattered farther off were the mangled remains of several people, barely human-shaped after a fierce magical clash. Merlin, Newt breathed. A Norwegian ministry official stepped forward, expression hard. Mr. Scamander will entrust these injured creatures to you. Their conditions are unstable. Our priority is to secure the perimeter, keep muggles away, and investigate, he gestured at the ruined bodies, the identities of these Valentine Troop members. Site cleanup and evidence collection will take time. Newt nodded and set to work. He cleaned and treated the Thunderbird's wounds, applying salves and countercharm ointments, but the more he worked, the deeper his frown grew. Many of the injuries, the deep burns and lacerations that looked like they'd been caused by hostile magic, were threaded through with something else. He tried everything obvious: counter curses, purification charms, expulsion hexes. The effects were minimal. This is a filthy trick, he muttered. The wounds were bound up with woven curses, malicious enchantments that resisted simple undoing. It was troublesome. He could only suppress and ease them, not remove them quickly. The dragon's injuries were uncertain, and its emotions still dangerously unstable inside the stone bowl. After a moment's thought, Newt decided on a plan. Perhaps into the case first, he told the Auror nearby. I can research how to lift these curses and help them recover in safety. They prepared the transfer, carefully lifting the unconscious Thunderbird and the dragon into suitable habitats inside Newt's enchanted suitcase, then turning their attention to calming and extracting the trapped dragon. The next morning, Lynn lounged on a deck chair in the first-class balcony of a wizarding ferry, enjoying a seaside breakfast. He idly opened the day's newspapers that had been delivered to his seat. The international travel edition of the Daily Prophet and the Norwegian Ministry of Magic Times. The headline in the latter caught his eye at once. Norwegian Ministry of Magic strikes hard, destroys large poaching ring. Valentine Troop. Subtitle: Magzoologist Newt Scamander rushes to aid, treats poached rare creatures. The article laid it out in detail. After a long, clandestine investigation, the Norwegian ministry had discovered that the celebrated touring performance group, known as the Valentine Troop, was a front for global poaching and smuggling of rare creatures. Last night, the Auror office had struck the troop's ship off the coast of Bergen. After an intense confrontation, They purportedly apprehended all members and rescued several poached beasts, including a thunderbird and a Peruvian viper tooth. The animals, the paper reported, were badly injured and entrusted to Newt Scamander for treatment. They would be returned to the wild when recovered. The ministry was quoted condemning the poaching and vowing continued crackdowns to protect magical biodiversity. Lynn nearly spat out his orange juice. Pfft. Apprehended all gang members? He wiped his mouth and laughed into his hand. Did they carefully collect the ashes too? Or has the Norwegian ministry started offering soul incarceration in their prisons? He smirked. Still, I didn't expect Mr. Scamander to be there. He thought of the collars he had dismantled and secretly hoped Newt wouldn't have to deal with whatever dark work had been done. He flipped to another paper. A smaller item in a corner drew his attention. Sources reveal Scamander's aid mission hindered. Security checks delay rescue now. The piece reported that, when Newt rushed to the scene, he'd been hindered by unusually thorough and time-consuming security checks at the International Flu Network hub and through ministry channels. An anonymous Department of Magical Transportation employee said Newt's case had been searched extremely thoroughly. Every inner pocket and habitat scanned repeatedly, taking nearly an hour. He'd even been asked to temporarily remove some non-dangerous creatures for visual confirmation. The delay had, the article claimed, frustrated some on site, though the ministry defended the checks as necessary for the safe international transportation of magical beasts. Lynn tapped his chin and let out a soft, contemplative hum. Hard to judge, he said to himself, and returned to his breakfast, the ferry rocking gently as the shoreline slipped by. 133. Take the money. Travel always felt short, even after a string of less than pleasant surprises. Lynn collapsed onto the oversoft sofa in his living room and let out a long sigh. Home really is the most comfortable, he murmured, only to be interrupted by a buzz from the enchanted communicator in his pocket. The screen lit with Ollie's name and a slightly melancholic profile picture. Lynn accepted the video call. What's up, Ollie? Something wrong? Ollie shook his head. Lynn, I just got an official notice from the Ministry of Magic. The ministry contacted you? Good news or bad? Lynn sat up. What is it about? It's about those werewolves who attacked my town, my dad's community, Ollie said. He paused. The Wizengamot is formally trying the 2 captured werewolf wizards the day after tomorrow, the ones they're calling Big Boss and Second Boss. My father and I have been summoned to testify. A lot of questions popped into Lynn's head. A trial? Wasn't the evidence already solid? They attacked a Muggle village, killed people, were caught red-handed. Shouldn't they just be sent to Azkaban? Why a formal trial now? How long has it been? Ollie frowned. The notice only said the case is complex and requires deliberation by the full Wizengamot, and ordered us to attend punctually to testify. My dad asked a relative in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, but they were vague, said there are instructions from above, it's just going through the motions. Going through the motions? Lynn scoffed. All right, what time and where? I'll go with you. 10 in the morning, the day after tomorrow. 10th underground level, Wizengamot courtroom, Ollie replied. See you then. 2 days later, Lynn dressed in a relatively formal wizarding robe, still with a hint of his usual casual flair, and followed a stern-looking ministry official down to the 10th floor below ground. The courtroom felt heavier than he'd imagined. Dim lighting, rough stone walls. Some members of the Wizengamot were already seated on the high bench, robes pulled tight, faces expressionless. In the center sat a sunken dock with 2 chained chairs for the defendants. Opposite them, the high bench and its row of seats. Ollie and his father were led to the witness stand and seated. Lynn, as an accompanying witness, took a place in the public gallery near the front. Heavy footsteps and the clink of metal echoed as 2 male wizards, weighed down by magical shackles on hands, feet, and neck, were dragged into the dock by a line of aurors and forced into the chairs. The remaining members of the Wizengamot filed in. Lynn scanned their faces and did not see Dumbledore. The last to enter was Minister for Magic Cornelius Fudge. Slightly plump and dressed in an ornate pinstriped robe, he took the seat of presiding judge, tapped a small gavel, and called, "Order." His voice carried through the chamber. The Wizengamot is now in session to hear the case of the werewolf wizards known as Big Boss and Second Boss for the attack on a Muggle community. Fudge read the charges aloud. The defendants, with 6 other werewolf wizards, had attacked the Thorn family's Muggle village on the night of date, leaving 1 wizard seriously injured, 4 Muggles dead, and causing extensive property damage. The Auror office had apprehended Big Boss and Second Boss at the scene. The other 5 attackers were killed. Formal charges were brought: illegal werewolf assembly, assaulting Muggles, grievous bodily harm, violating the werewolf code of conduct, and more. Then came witness testimony. Ollie and his father stepped up in turn, swore an oath, and recounted the night's events. Their accounts were clear. Mr. Thorne's calm, businesslike narration was especially persuasive. Afterward, Fudge displayed photographs and oral reports collected at the scene. The defense rose next. A sharply dressed lawyer with gold-rimmed glasses stood and addressed the court. Honorable members of the Wizengamot, Your Honor, my clients do not dispute the facts of the physical attack. The key point is this: they did not commit these atrocities of their own free will or through mere werewolf savagery. He looked around, drawing the attention of many on the bench, then continued. They were controlled, bewitched, and manipulated by an extremely malevolent and powerful dark arts artifact. They lost self-awareness and became instruments of slaughter. My clients are victims as well. Evidence? Fudge asked. The evidence is in my client's memories, the lawyer said. We ask the court to allow extraction of the relevant memories to reveal the truth. Fudge nodded. Granted. Have an official from the Obliviator Squad assist. A witch stepped forward and, using a specialized charm, carefully drew strands of memory from the temples of Big Boss and Second Boss and into a prepared pensieve. The silvery liquid swirled, then projected an image into the air for the courtroom to see. In the memory, 7 werewolf wizards wandered a dim forest and discovered a half-buried stone basin, an ancient object that resembled a pensieve. Curiosity led them to look inside. One by one, they plunged their faces into the basin. When they lifted their heads, their eyes were crimson and they made guttural, bestial noises. The scene cut to them, crimson-eyed, arriving at the edge of Ollie's community and beginning the attack. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber as the memory finished. Lynn felt his anger rise. Damn it, he thought. Could they not fabricate a better story? Just happened to find a mind control artifact? Just happened to attack Ollie's village right after? Just happened to lose every shred of self-control and mindlessly kill? Lynn was sure one of the attackers was the same werewolf they'd seen in the Forbidden Forest. He couldn't be bothered to follow the rest of the defense's theatrics. The lawyer cited obscure dark arts texts about the risks of such artifacts, arguing his clients were doubly victimized, first by their nature, then by the dark arts. Fudge asked perfunctory questions. Had there been any prior signs of control? Why wasn't the item reported sooner? And the defendant's answers were halting and full of gaps, but the defense patched them with quick, plausible explanations. Several Wizengamot members looked convinced. A few were not. An austere, older witch, likely Griselda Marchbanks, and a grim-faced member glared, clearly skeptical. Let's vote, Fudge said, tapping his gavel again. Members of the Wizengamot voted in turn. Over half raised their hands, pronouncing the defendants guilty. The attack itself was indisputable. An ambiguous memory and a persuasive lawyer were not enough to overturn that. Lynn noticed, though, that a fair number either voted not guilty or abstained. Fudge's face registered a faint, private relief as the results were tallied. He had pulled every string he could, used every influence, and bought every vote within reach. The outcome was pragmatic, not as blatant as an acquittal, nor as severe as the harshest penalties. The galleons he had been promised had already landed in his pocket. He could account for them. He had taken the money and still done the job. Professional, in his own way. Clearing his throat, Fudge pronounced the sentence. Based on the deliberations and vote of the Wizengamot, this court finds werewolf wizards Big Boss and Second Boss guilty of attacking a Muggle community and related charges. Ollie and his father breathed slightly easier. Fudge's tone shifted. However, considering the possibility that the defendants were bewitched by an unknown dark arts artifact and may not have acted with complete malicious intent, this court will exercise leniency. Both defendants are hereby sentenced to 10 years in Azkaban. 10 years. The sentence was laughably light, a stern gesture followed by a slap on the wrist. 10 years in Azkaban, with dementors and werewolf physiology, was uncertain in its cruelty, but it was not a death sentence or life imprisonment. The courtroom buzzed with dissatisfied remarks and seemingly reasonable nods. The two defendants kept their heads bowed. Their faces were unreadable, but their shoulders sagged as if some weight had eased. 134. There are no criminals here. The trial was over. The two werewolves, heads bowed, left the Wizengamot courtroom under the escort of Aurors. 10 years in Azkaban awaited them. Lynn watched them go, expressionless. He turned toward the witness stand and walked over to Ollie, who still looked furious, and gently patted his shoulder. "How are you holding up?" Lynn asked. His eyes asked more. Did Ollie want him to provide a less legal, but far more efficient sort of justice? An accident on the way to imprisonment, or perhaps making Azkaban's living conditions a little more attentive? Ollie inhaled deeply, glanced at Lynn, and shook his head with firm resolve. In a low voice, he repeated, word for word, "You said a gentleman's revenge. 10 years is not too long." Lynn blinked. For a moment, he suspected his ears were playing tricks. Wait 10 years? Really? We're Ollie, and he really going to sit back and let those two rot in Azkaban for a decade before settling the score? Have either of them ever waited that long for revenge? Lynn's memory supplied the usual results. Immediate cleanups, or at most a month. The ashes of those poachers in Norway had probably gone cold long ago. Ollie, revenge is about timing and efficiency, Lynn tried, lowering his voice to something almost diplomatic. It's best served immediately, letting it sit. Well, the interest accrues overnight. Ollie had already decided. He waved Lynn off and cut him short, voice steady. "Lynn, don't try to change my mind. This time I'll do it my way. I'll remember this day, their crimes, and this unfair verdict. 10 years, that's enough time for me to get stronger." Lynn only stared. He hadn't realized his roommate could be so stubborn. Finally, he spread his hands in surrender. "Fine," he said, "you'll regret it." Life settled back into its shallow calm. Lynn resumed his holiday routine, keeping an eye on his shop in Diagon Alley. He introduced several new alchemical items, including a new broom model he named Herba. With Kai's blessing, business was booming. He teased his pets and tried using his newly acquired hand of summoning thunder to give the magical plants in his garden an artificial thunderstorm fertilization. Results varied, and the plants voiced strong opinions about it. Ollie channeled his anger into work, practicing spells and studying harder than before, eyes quieter and more resolute. Time crept by, and before he realized it, August had slipped into late summer. That morning, Lynn lounged in his soft, spacious bed, caught in a pleasant dream about hauling in a good-sized fish. Warm sunlight sifted through the curtains. Then a sudden chill, slick and venomous as a snake, slipped into the room and coiled around him, ripping him out of sleep. Lynn sat bolt upright, shaken. Everything in the room looked normal. The sky outside was bright. He touched his forehead and checked the air. "What is this?" he muttered. "It's only August. Even for Britain, this temperature drop is absurd. A summer cold snap?" The cold felt wrong. More than low temperature, it had an edge, and it seemed to be coming from outside. From downstairs came a flurry of panicked wing beats and a frightened voice. "Holy hell! What is that? You scared the feathers off me! Lynn, help!" Old Eight, clearly chased by something unseen, flew up the stairs in a blur and dived into Lynn's arms, trembling. Lynn scooped the terrified bird in and tried to calm it, while the alarms in his chest went off. Peter's jolt had been triggered. "Dobby!" Lynn called. The house elf appeared instantly. "Master? Take Old Eight inside. Stay there and strengthen the wards." Lynn handed the still shivering bird to Dobby and grabbed his wand from the bedside table. He ran downstairs in his pajamas, every part of him alert. When he threw open the living room door that led to the garden, a cold gust rolled in, carrying a chill that raised goosebumps. The sunlight outside had dimmed. Above his garden, several tattered, black-cloaked figures floated low. Wherever they hovered, the air seemed to congeal. Flowers and plants wilted and froze beneath a thin veneer of frost. Still half asleep and startled, Lynn's first irritated thought was practical and petty. Which dark wizard with a warped sense of humor had come by to stage creepy lawn art this early in the morning? He didn't think twice. Annoyed at being woken and at having his morning disturbed, he flicked his wand. Confringo! The blasting curse left his wand tip and struck the nearest cloaked figure, but instead of an explosion at the figure, the spell sailed through it as though hitting an illusion and detonated in the air behind. The robed shape didn't flare or even flutter. The cloaks turned, if they could be said to have heads, in unison. The temperature plunged again, and an oppressive wave of despair rolled over Lynn, trying to drown out all rational thought with cold hopelessness. He heard voices that sounded like agonized wailing. Dementors, he said out loud, instantly sober. The uninvited visitors were the guards of Azkaban, dark, soul-feeding creatures that preyed on happy memories. The only thing stranger than their presence was the fact they were here at all. This wasn't Azkaban. No one here had broken the law. Why were Dementors patrolling his garden? Lynn tightened his grip on his wand, eyes sharp. Whatever their reason, they were trespassing, frightening his pet, and ruining his sleep. This morning, he decided he'd wake his muscles and give the Ministry's disobedient guard dogs a lesson. The tip of his wand began to glow. The silver light at the tip of Lynn's wand first spread like morning mist, then, in an instant, began to contract inward. The mist thickened and brightened until it collapsed into a pure white sphere of light the size of a basketball, so brilliant it hurt to look at directly. The orb reshaped itself, its outline sketching faster than the eye could follow. A long, graceful neck, a sleek body, feathers unfolding, powerful wings, and finally long tail plumes. The whole thing formed in a single breath. As he finished the incantation, the Patronus was already alive. Expecto Patronum, a lifelike silver phoenix, uncannily resembling Wu-An, burst from the wand. Its wings scattered motes of light as it shot toward the few Dementors still hanging in the cold air. Abba! One keened. Food. Fresh food. Perhaps it had been too long since it left Azkaban, or perhaps Lynn simply smelled irresistible. One of the Dementors was unusually eager. Instead of recoiling like the others when the Patronus appeared, it hissed greedily and plunged straight at Lynn, its path aimed at the phoenix. There was even a hint of impatience in its flight. Lynn arched an eyebrow. Huh, someone's not afraid of death, he said. The silver phoenix met the pitch-black despair head-on. There was no explosion, only a sharp, agonized howl from the Dementor. Its form went shh, blurring and scattering. The solid black cloak disintegrated like smoke in a gale, leaving only a drifting shadow wailing as it slunk away. Abba! Run! Danger! Whatever instincts they had, the remaining Dementors suddenly felt them. Seeing their companions shredded, whatever greed they'd had evaporated into retreat. They chittered incoherently and fled in all directions, abandoning the delicious soul below and moving several times faster than when they'd arrived. They weren't clever, but they had enough danger sense and self-preservation to bolt. Well, the one that had charged the Patronus was probably the village idiot of Dementors. Already running? Lynn watched the scattering black shapes and couldn't let it end there. He wanted them to remember. He raised his wand and cast Sonorous, his voice booming through the morning as if with odd cheer. Since you're already here, why not stay and have a seat? My place is spacious, and I have special snacks. Most of the Dementors fled even faster. One, however, hesitated a short distance off and glanced back. That single look met Lynn's gaze. He was on the ground, smiling broadly. His smile grew friendlier, and he even waved, showing a row of teeth that flashed in the light. Well, appraisal complete. This one might be dim, but it could at least respond, receive and give feedback. Since it had looked back, it had, by Lynn's logic, agreed to be a guest. He didn't hesitate. The phoenix folded its wings into a silver streak and shot after the curious Dementor at blinding speed. The fleeing thing heard the Patronus approaching and sounded a howl full of panic. Abba! Don't come here. You still coming back? Lynn called, urging his Patronus on. Abba! 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 I won't. I'll never dare again. Just then his phone buzzed. Caller ID, Edgar Burns. Hello? Edgar's voice was all urgency and gossip. Lynn, have you seen this morning's Daily Prophet? Front page, huge news. That murderous Death Eater, Sirius Black, who killed over a dozen muggles and Peter Pettigrew, he's escaped from Azkaban. My God, Azkaban. They say he's the first to ever get out. The ministry's in chaos. Minister Fudge is frantic and has sent out most of the Dementors from Azkaban to scour the world for Black. The paper says Sirius could appear anywhere. Everyone's supposed to stay alert and report anything suspicious. Lynn only half listened and answered casually, "Oh, Dementors, I've already seen them." There was a stunned pause on the line. Then Edgar's voice spiked. "What? Seen them? What's happening? Lynn, where are you? You're not telling me those things came to your place, are you?" That would be terrible luck. Lynn considered for a beat and decided on the simplest reply. See for yourself." He flipped the phone's camera and pointed it forward. The phoenix hovered in the air, a Dementor curled into a twitching, pishable ball under its light. Edgar inhaled audibly, a cold, shocked sound, then fell silent. A few seconds later, he managed. You beat up a Dementor? The Ministries, whatever, just as long as you're happy." As always, Edgar summed things up with the universal, "As long as you're happy." "Yeah, don't worry about it. I need to continue reasoning with it. It really doesn't know how many eyes Grandpa Lynn has," Lynn said, then ended the call without waiting for any more commentary. No sooner had he hung up than his phone started ringing again. "Ollie," Lynn answered with a dry tone. "Hello? I'm busy educating the Ministry of Magic's prison guards." Ollie was stunned. "Dementors? Correct. No reward." There was a pause on Ollie's end. "Edgar told me a prisoner escaped from Azkaban." 136. No right to be strange. Lynn on the other end of the phone could barely keep from laughing. Ollie's turnabout had been astonishingly quick. "So, you've really figured it all out?" Lynn asked, suppressing a grin. Ollie's voice came back, upbeat and decisive. "Yes, I've figured it out. A gentleman's revenge is best served continuously, morning to night." He was remarkably flexible in his thinking, keeping pace with whatever idea struck him. "I want to learn the Patronus charm," he said more firmly. "And then, if I get the chance, I'm going to Azkaban." He left the rest unspoken, but the meaning was clear. Sirius's escape had pushed him from passive waiting into active pursuit of justice. Lynn raised an eyebrow. "The Patronus charm? You want to learn that to visit Azkaban? Not a bad plan. But can't your father teach you? I remember Mr. Thorne is a wizard." Though Charles lived mostly in the Muggle world, he should know basic magic. Ollie's tone soured. "My father," he sounded embarrassed. "He's not very good at practical magic. He barely scraped by in charms and defense at Owls. He can't cast a complicated charm like the Patronus. Besides, he's busy with the company right now." Lynn smacked his forehead. He'd almost forgotten. "You want me to teach you?" he mused, rubbing his chin. "I've never taught anyone magic. Wait." A bright, morally dubious idea struck him. He remembered a book he'd skimmed once, something by a neurotic wizard who bragged about dancing with Azkaban's Dementors for 300 days. There'd been a chapter about mastering a powerful Patronus by capturing a weakened Dementor, locking it in a cellar, and practicing daily until success. He'd read it as a novelty then, but now, staring at Ollie's eagerness and the trembling Dementor he'd invited back, the plan seemed perfect. "I haven't taught anyone," Lynn said into the phone, "but I know a very efficient way to learn. Wait at home. I'm on my way." Beep. The call was answered the instant he dialed, as if Ollie had been waiting by the door. "Lynn," Ollie said, "I'm at your front door." Lynn didn't waste words. Ollie practically sprinted to open the door, face full of anticipation. "That fast? Shall we start? Do we need the backyard? There's more space out there." He practically dragged Lynn inside. Lynn waved him off and led him to his bedroom. "Not here. But you definitely need to prepare yourself mentally first." Ollie blinked. "Mental preparation? I know the Patronus requires a happy memory. I'll try to think of something." No, Lynn cut in. "You misunderstood. I'm not going to be the one teaching you." Ollie went silent, baffled. "Not Lynn? Then who? Read a book? Hire another professor?" Lynn didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened a trunk, set it on the carpet, and lifted the lid. "Follow me." Trusting Lynn, Ollie went along. Lynn crawled into the trunk first and motioned him through. They emerged into a small, reinforced compartment Lynn had made, and Ollie's eyes widened. In the space, Wuan stood beside a transparent cage that shimmered faintly. Inside, a tall figure in tattered black robes huddled in the far corner, trying to make itself smaller. A chill radiated from it, dropping the temperature noticeably near the cage. The figure trembled, the darkness under its cloak flickering, and it let out a weak, aggrieved sound. Ubba! It was the Dementor Lynn had brought back. Ollie took an involuntary step back, hand reaching for his wand. Even through the cage and at a distance, the suffocating cold and despair pressed at him. Lynn, what is this? His voice shook. He had not expected Lynn's efficient method to involve an actual Dementor. As you can see, Lynn said, tapping the cage. The sound made the Dementor shrink visibly. Your exclusive teaching aid, your sparring partner, and your test subject, a Dementor in good condition. He turned to Ollie with a grin. Ollie found almost demonic. Surprised? Shocked? No more wasting time. Cast your Patronus at it. Remember, the happiest memory. And the more terrified it gets, the better your practice. Don't worry, the cage is sturdy and Wuan's watching. It won't dare to act up, probably. Ollie stared from the black figure to Lynn's expectant face and felt his world tilt. Using a Dementor to practice the Patronus? Brutal. But thinking of his mother killed by a werewolf and the recent attacks on his home, resolve hardened. He drew his wand, took a steadying breath, and faced the cage. I'll try. Good, fight spirit. Lynn stepped forward and with a soft click, opened the cage. Ollie! The shout nearly made him drop his wand. For a moment, the Dementor seemed stunned. It looked at Lynn, then at Wuan, and realized it was outmatched. The memory of being double-teamed was fresh. It turned its attention to the only real emotional target in the room. Abba! Delicacy! It shrieked, and lunged straight for Ollie. The sensation of its charge was far worse than seeing it through bars. The fragile, happy images Ollie had tried to build flickered like a candle in a draft, and gloom began to seep in. Expecto Patronum. Light sputtered from his wand, weak, unsteady, and then snuffed out by the Dementor's cold. It was a failure. Expecto Patronum, he tried again. A flash of silver burst forth. A shining Patronus sprang from his wand, winged and bright, and struck the Dementor just short of Ollie. Abba! Ouch, ouch! The creature howled, dispersing violently and whipping back into the cage. Lynn flicked his hand. The door shut and locked. Ollie inhaled, braced himself. Again! Lynn opened the cage. The Dementor hesitated. Temptation won. Abba, I must eat this time, it cried and surged forward, though a touch slower this time. Expecto Patronum, Ollie bit out. The silver light came again, steadier and brighter, hinting its shape before dissipating. Just then Lynn's Patronus materialized and swatted the Dementor back into the cage. Abba, again, it complained. Not bad, the silver was brighter, Lynn encouraged and reopened the door without mercy. Abba, I charge! Expecto Patronum. Ollie's light held for 2 seconds, then failed. Lynn's Patronus intervened. Smack, the Dementor clattered back. Again! Abba, why again? The creature whined. Expecto Patronum. This time a faint outline of a small animal flashed from Ollie's wand. Lynn's Patronus filled the gap. Bang, the Dementor hit the cage. Again, the Dementor moaned. Abba, I'm a bit full. Don't want to eat anymore, it complained feebly. Expecto Patronum. Ollie was sweating. The silver light was weak. Lynn's Patronus did its part, whoosh, smack, and the Dementor collapsed again. Again. After Lynn opened the cage this time, the Dementor simply cowered deeper into the corner and refused to cooperate. It even cast a grudging look at Ollie, as if pleading, please, just end me, or swap targets? Why are this young master's happy memories so heavy? Lynn was momentarily speechless. The Dementor had attitude. Lynn curled a finger on the transparent wall. Come out, we're not done yet. It played possum, refusing to move. Lynn sighed, raised his wand, and aimed at the cage. Looks like I'll have to use some coercive measures. Expecto. Before he finished, the Dementor shot up, indignant. Abba! Abba, bah! If I come out, you hit me. If I don't come out, you still hit me. Have you wizards no sense of decency? What happened to Dementor rights? It launched a rapid string of complaints. The silver light at Lynn's wand tip flared. He said flatly, cut the nonsense. Come out and take your beating, or I'll go in and help you loosen up. The Dementor fell silent. 137. Don't lay a hand on us. We're on the same side. The Dementor finally submitted. The tattered figure drifted out of the cage with obvious reluctance, hovering in midair as if to say, do whatever you want to me. Even the cold it exhaled was weaker now, but it still carried a thick, lingering grievance. Expecto Patronum, Ollie shouted. This time what erupted from his wand was no longer a wavering mote of light, but a steady, much brighter silver beam. It surged forward with unstoppable momentum, not yet formed into an animal, but driven straight at the listless Dementor. The creature flinched and tried to dodge, but it was half a beat too slow. The beam struck it. It wasn't powerful enough to dissipate the Dementor outright like Lynn's Patronus could, but the creature hissed as if burned. Its body convulsed, and it retreated in panic, scurrying back into the cage and shrinking into a corner, refusing to come out. The silver light on Ollie's wand lingered for 3 full seconds after hitting before finally fading. Ollie panted, staring at his wand in disbelief and then at the trembling Dementor. Lynn allowed himself a satisfied smile, closed the cage, and patted Ollie on the shoulder. "Beautifully done, Ollie. It hasn't taken a full form yet, but you've used the Patronus charm to repel a Dementor. That's a qualitative leap." Inside the cage, the Dementor curled up even tighter, thinking only one thing. This apprentice is ruthless, and the mentor is worse. "I want to go back to Azkaban. It's boring there, but at least I won't be someone's daily punching bag and teaching aid." Lynn rubbed his chin, his mind already turning. Edgar and William don't know the Patronus charm either, do they?" he mused aloud, as if asking himself and looking for agreement. "Ollie's just started and has made remarkable progress. Maybe I should bring them in for some special training as well. The more the merrier. It builds the right atmosphere." He didn't speak loudly, but everyone heard him. The Dementor, still licking its spiritual wounds, shuddered violently at the idea, its cloak trembling. "No, please, that's unnecessary, isn't it?" it croaked, trying to appeal to Lynn's better nature. Lynn put on a look of serious consideration and then nodded slowly. You have a point." The Dementor felt a flicker of hope. Then Lynn continued, smiling as if the thought had only just occurred to him. "But if teaching resources are spread too thin, the results suffer. All the more reason to call them over. They can take turns, improve the utilization rate of our teaching aid. They could observe and learn from one another, create a healthy competition. Great idea. I'll make the call now." The Dementor went utterly still. The next few days became, for that unfortunate captive, perhaps the most fulfilling and also the darkest period of its long existence. In the small special training area, the same scene replayed in rotation. Lynn handling the cage door, safety checks, and the necessary demonstrative strikes. Ollie, William, and Edgar taking turns facing the Dementor, forcing their minds to squeeze out happy memories and strengthen their wills to summon a Patronus. Ollie, after his breakthrough, advanced quickly. His Patronus solidified from a beam into a distinct animal, an elephant. William, the top student with a solid theoretical base and a calm temperament, adjusted faster when frightened. His Patronus took the form of an octopus. Edgar, however, hit a bottleneck. His happiest memories were too tinged with carelessness and fleeting joy. His Patronus repeatedly failed to take shape. After many more rounds of special training, and far more failures than Ollie and William had endured, just as the Dementor was becoming numb to Edgar's attempts, Edgar shouted, "Expecto Patronum." Silver light burst forth. This time, it didn't scatter. It condensed and formed, an animal with tiny branching antlers and a short tail, looking somewhat silly. It trotted on 4 legs toward the cage with a curious, almost foolish air. "I did it! I did it!" Edgar cried, leaping up to point at his Patronus. "Look, what kind of animal is that? Is it some magical creature I've never seen?" Lynn watched the silver creature bounce up to the cage and kept his composure, though his lip twitched. If I'm not mistaken, that's a roe deer." "A roe deer? What's that? Is it powerful?" Edgar asked, still excited by the novelty. Lynn did his best to explain objectively. "It's a type of animal known for odd reactions. It's extremely curious and can act rather dim-witted around predators. It might freeze when startled or run away only to come back out of curiosity to see what scared it. People jokingly call it the silly roe deer." The smile drained from Edgar's face, but Lynn quickly added, "Still, the form doesn't matter. What matters is that it appeared and it's solid. That shows your happiness and determination are real, and it looks full of energy." Edgar blinked hard, on the verge of tears. With the special training finished, all 3 had made great strides, at least enough to protect themselves and repel a single Dementor. That day, Edgar found Lynn with a serious expression. "Lynn, when do you plan to go to Azkaban?" "Doesn't Ollie want to? Well, visit those 2 werewolves." Lynn checked the time. "School starts soon. Sooner is better. Let's go tomorrow." "Aye." William and I can come too, Edgar began, but Lynn cut him off. You and William stay here. Do you think Azkaban is Diagon Alley? A place you can just stroll in and out of? And too many people increase the chance of being spotted. If something happens to you, I'll be distracted looking after you. Edgar's face fell. He knew Lynn was right, but the blunt refusal still stung. Lynn sent him off and walked to the makeshift cage. The Dementor looked haggard after days of high-intensity work and shrank back at his approach. Lynn's smile was suddenly very kind, a smile the creature found terrifying because it was so false. He raised his wand. The silver phoenix that served as his Patronus appeared, and without a word, slapped the trapped Dementor with a wing. The creature went stunned. Lynn's smile vanished. I have a question, he said. Answer honestly, where exactly is Azkaban located? The Dementor bristled. It had been forced into service as a teaching aid, but betraying the prison's location meant betraying its comrades. It shook its head, refusing. Professional ethics, it thought. Lynn's expression went cold. It seems the previous teaching was too gentle. Let's see how a Patronus charm with a little extra persuasion tastes. Expecto Patronum, he intoned. But this time, there was an edge to it. The Patronus appeared, its silver glow tinged with a shadow at the edges. The magic was no longer purely protective. It carried a strange, corrosive quality. The Dementor screamed, No, wait! I'm one of yours! I know the way! I'll take you there! Follow me! Follow me! Late the next night, Lynn and Ollie followed the Dementor, masked and constrained by Lynn's spells, as it lifted off from a remote coastal cliff. Lynn flew unaided while Ollie rode a broom. They crossed a surging black sea. After some time, a dark silhouette on the horizon resolved into an island, Azkaban. Even under the night sky, it radiated gloom, shrouded in low, persistent clouds that swallowed stars and moonlight. Jagged rocks cut the coastline. There was no green to be seen, only stone and the outlines of a massive fortress. Around the island, several slow-moving dark figures, Dementors on patrol, drifted in the air. Only these few on patrol? Lynn asked the leading Dementor. The guard density was much lower than he'd expected. Most are out hunting fugitives. Haven't returned yet, the creature answered honestly. Lynn understood. The Ministry had likely diverted many of Azkaban's forces to the hunt for Sirius Black. They lowered their altitude and, under the cover of darkness and a disillusionment charm, approached a side of the island where defenses were weaker. Down near a rough sentry post along the coast, voices drifted up on the wind. Two rather lax oars were slouched at their post, clearly bored and unfocused. When do you think this misery will end? When will I finally be transferred out of this hellhole? One complained. I don't know. Probably not until the Dementors out searching for Black come back, the other replied. Once they're back, maybe we can apply for rotation. The first voice lowered into a fanciful murmur. You ever think about how we'd get transferred immediately? Like if something big happened here, some escape or mess, couldn't we file it as insufficient capability or poor on-site handling and be moved straight away? Even going back to headquarters to write a self-reflection would be better than staying here. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. You know, that's not impossible. I've even thought up the memo the bosses would write. He read it in a mock official tone. Given the recent consecutive security incidents at Azkaban, which have exposed shortcomings in the experience and capabilities of the current personnel, it is recommended that XXX and XXX be transferred from their current posts for further training and assessment. The two of them laughed softly, the sound swallowed by the cold night around Azkaban. A certain cell block in Azkaban. The air seemed to congeal there, cold stone walls slick with seepage, and a single torch at the end of the corridor threatening to gutter out. Most cells were empty, but deeper in the block, two facing cells still hinted at life. Big Brother, the thinner werewolf in the left cell whispered, clutching the bars and peering across. We've been in this cursed place for days. Is anyone really coming to get us? Those Dementors keep floating around. It creeps me out. Even a werewolf didn't like to be surrounded by Dementors for long. In the opposite cell, the werewolf they called the boss sat propped against the wall. He scoffed despite the pallor at his temples, trying to put on a bravado that didn't reach his eyes. Don't worry, Second Brother. When have I ever miscalculated? How do you think I ended up with a 10-year sentence? Do you really think the ministry had a sudden change of heart? He scooted closer to the bars and dropped his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, a smugness faintly at odds with the setting. I planned an escape route ages ago. The Valentine Troupe? Remember them? They perform out in the Muggle world, but they have wild connections. I bought access, spent a fortune greasing a few key ministry hands. Those galleons weren't given for nothing. Mentioning galleons made his mouth twitch, the thought of all his ill-gotten coins, the reward for years of robberies and dealing with Valentine, stung like an old wound. But money's only skin deep. As long as we're alive, there's hope. If we get out with what we can do, are we scared of not getting richer? We'll live high. This place can't hold us. The more he talked, the brighter his picture of the future became, freedom already unfolding in his mind. Second brother brightened and nodded. Big brother's right. The Valentine Troupe has pull. All our jobs before went smoothly. The boss laughed, loud and liberating in the stone corridor. That sound, hunger mingled with hope, drifted through the damp air. A few dementors nearby, drawn by the unusual fragrance of such strong emotion, drifted closer and gathered outside the iron bars. The boss went on picturing fresh food, wealth, and comfort. Second brother, swept up in the daydream, momentarily forgot his terror. Then the laughter cut off. They looked up and saw tall black shapes pressed against the bars outside their cells. Be Big Brother. Second brother's teeth began to chatter. Shut up! Don't be afraid, ah! Meanwhile, Lynn and Ollie had been moving cautiously through the corridor of Azkaban, guided by the traitorous Dementor. A scream ahead made them pause. Lynn stopped. Ollie's head snapped up. That werewolf's voice? They exchanged a glance and hurried toward the sound. The traitor Dementor melted into a corner, pretending not to exist. Around the corner, 7 or 8 Dementors were clustered outside the 2 cells, their black forms almost covering the doors. They're popular, aren't they? Lynn said. Without hesitating, both witches raised their wands. Expecto Patronum, they cast together. A silver phoenix burst from Lynn's wand, wild and shining. A silver elephant answered from Ollie's, solid and inexorable. The phoenix charged with furious speed. The elephant advanced in calm, relentless steps, flanking the gathered Dementors. The creatures gave off high, twitchy noises, chittering giggles quite unlike the traitor's staccato "Abba." Panicked, they scattered. The chill that pressed through the bars slacked off immediately. Inside the cells, the boss and second brother collapsed, wheezing, eyes unfocused as if hauled from deep water. Blurred shapes formed in their vision. Second brother forced himself to raise his head. The plan the boss had been describing surfaced in his foggy mind. Be Big Brother, it's Valentine's people. They came to save us. Pull yourself together. A crimson streak of light stabbed through the bars and struck second brother straight in the chest. Cruciatus. Ollie's voice was flat and efficient. No. Ah! A pain sharper than the cold seep of Dementors tore through him. He curled up, screaming. Muscle spasms contorted him. The fragile recovery of awareness was drowned by pain. The boss stared, stunned. Lynn strolled to the cell door with lazy amusement, looking at them in the gloom. Valentine? Tsk. We're talking about the troop leader burned to charcoal in Norway. His ashes are long cold. Want to see him? We can send you there right away. He cocked his head, pretending to muse. But who taught that Crucio? The technique was authentic, layered, efficient, hard to guess. He winked at Ollie. Ollie's eyes rolled. He raised his wand and aimed at the boss. Cruciatus. Another crimson bolt slashed into the cell. The boss screamed, joining second brother in a duet of agonized howls. For a while, the 2 cells served as improvised punishment rooms. Ollie worked through every non-lethal but excruciating spell he knew. Lynn wasn't idle. He cast a muffliato over the area so the werewolf's screams wouldn't echo down the corridors and attract other guards, then sent his Patronus back to patrol the passage, keeping Dementors at bay. In fact, the Dementors had no desire to return. They ran into the traitorous Dementor in its corner and clustered around it as it babbled its heroic-sounding tale of escape. Abba, Ababa, brothers, don't go in there. I just escaped those 2 demon wizards. You wouldn't believe it. They're not even human. Blah, blah, blah. It chattered, inflating its flight. The other Dementors listened, bewildered at first, then more cautious. Giggle? Really? That powerful? Giggle, giggle. Sounds scary. I got hit too. They altered their patrol, avoiding the area. Inside the cell, Ollie finally lowered his wand. He was breathing hard, sweat purling at his hairline. He looked down at the two werewolf wizards sprawled on the floor. All of his anger and contempt from years of stories and rumors felt like it had been vented. He raised his wand and cast Reducto, twice. The two men in their tattered prison robes crumbled to dust, rustling into two small piles that mixed with the dirt on the floor, indistinguishable. Ollie exhaled, satisfied. That's enough. Let's go. Lynn's voice lingered at his shoulder, soft and mildly reproving. Your cleanup was unprofessional. If ministry people find two living people turned to ash, even a fool would suspect foul play. Ollie paused, looking at him. Lynn waved his wand casually. Scourgify. The cells were immaculate in an instant, stone and bars sparkling as if no one had been there and nothing had happened. Ollie stared at the spotless floor, speechless for a beat. He hadn't thought that far ahead. Let's go, Lynn said, patting Ollie on the shoulder. Time to go home. 139. It's you again. A few days later, in the Minister for Magic's office, Cornelius Fudge sat behind an ornate desk, his face unusually grave. He clutched a parchment report printed in stark letters across the top. Preliminary investigation report regarding the loss of Azkaban detainees, numbers XXXXX. The report made his blood boil. The opening described, in the customary bureaucratic way, how two empty cells had been discovered during a routine patrol, and how the two werewolf wizards, each sentenced to 10 years, had been confirmed missing. But the analysis that followed infuriated him. Instead of concentrating on the cause of the escape and identifying suspects, the report spent page after page criticizing the guards' inexperience, lack of vigilance, and glaring shortcomings in emergency response, recommending reassignment and retraining of responsible personnel, and suggesting more senior aurors be deployed to bolster perimeter and internal security. And helpfully, the report closed with a sentence that set his face a deeper red. Furthermore, given that primary pursuit forces are currently focused on searching for the fugitive Sirius Black, it is recommended that the minister's office consider appropriately increasing the bounty and authorizing the use of more international resources in hopes of closing the case quickly, stabilizing public sentiment, and diverting. Divert their attention, my arse, Fudge finally snapped, slamming the parchment down. These good-for-nothings, idiots. The guards lose prisoners, and rather than try to catch them, their first thought is to find an excuse, and now they want me to raise the bounty. His round face flushed. Most galling of all was that those two werewolves had been given 10-year sentences only because of his personal intervention, and now they had simply vanished. Umbridge, he called toward the door. The door opened at once. Dolores Umbridge, in a cloyingly pink suit and her usual sickly smile, padded in on dainty feet. Minister, did you call for me? Look at this. Fudge pushed the report across the desk, his anger still simmering. Something's happened at Azkaban. Again. 2 werewolves are gone. Vanished. Umbridge skimmed the pages with bright, calculating eyes and quickly grasped both the facts and the political danger. Her voice climbed an octave. Oh, Minister, such a regrettable little administrative oversight, but please be reassured. This matter will be handled properly. It will not reflect badly on you or the ministry. Fudge's jaw stayed tight. Handle it immediately. Of course, Minister. Please calm down. Have a cup of hot tea. She busied herself already with soothing tones as if talk were a magical balm. Fudge's attention, however, was elsewhere. The missing prisoners and the potential scandal they represented would not be smoothed over by tea. He pinched the bridge of his nose and stared at the ceiling, thinking of the headlines that might come next. Time moved on, and soon it was September 1st. Platform 9 3/4 buzzed with the usual chaos. Lynn climbed aboard the Hogwarts Express and found a compartment by the window. He sat, and before long, Ollie, Edgar, and William slid in behind him. Ollie had gone back to his quiet self. Edgar was as loud as ever, chattering about trivialities. William pushed his glasses up and arranged his books in neat, silent rows. The train gave a long, sleepy whistle, then eased out of London toward the Scottish Highlands. Lynn accepted a copy of the Daily Prophet delivered by an owl and unfolded it. The front page leapt out at him. Azkaban sees another bizarre disappearance incident. Is Minister for Magic Cornelius Fudge really competent? Special commentator Rita Skeeter. The article took no prisoners. Azkaban, it proclaimed, the fortress meant to end the evil, was suffering a recent leakage syndrome. After Sirius Black's escape, reliable sources reported that 2 more prisoners, werewolves implicated in Muggle attacks, had mysteriously disappeared. 2 such serious security incidents in quick succession, Rita demanded, must make every law-abiding wizard question whether Cornelius Fudge could properly run a maximum security prison. The piece went on to suggest that instead of activating emergency protocols, the minister had tried to suppress the news to protect the ministry's image and wondered if there might be darker motives or sheer incompetence beneath the surface. Edgar peered over and grinned. Reading the paper? What's the scoop? The Daily Prophet? Is Rita Skeeter bashing Dumbledore again? He said, yanking the paper and skimming with exaggerated tsk, tsk, tsk. Morals are sliding. Integrity is gone. Is Azkaban really that easy to get in and out of? Fudge's chair must be feeling hot. Lynn handed the paper back. What does that have to do with me? I didn't write the report. He yawned, drew an eye mask from his bag, put it on, and leaned back. Wake me when we arrive. Edgar watched him with a curl of a lip and murmured to William, He's playing innocent. Edgar was sure Lynn had some involvement. After all, why else would Fudge have been so lenient with those 2? The compartment fell quiet. Edgar produced snacks, William read, and Ollie stared out at the fields rushing by. After a while, the train slid into a thick haze. The landscape outside blurred. Lynn tore off his eye mask and sat up just as screech, grind. The emergency brakes screamed. The carriage lurched and everyone thrown forward. Snacks tumbled, books flew, and Ollie whacked the seat in front. What's happened? Someone shouted. Merlin's beard. Voices and collisions from neighboring compartments mixed with the screeching rails. Then a mood, cold and familiar, fell over the carriage. Foul. Edgar shot up. It's a Dementor. That feeling, it's a Dementor. How did one get on the train? Expecto Patronum. 3 Patronuses flashed into being inside the compartment, silver and protective, hovering between the 4 of them and the doorway. Lynn hadn't intended to act. He supposed the others' charms would do, but then the compartment door clicked and slid open. A ragged, black figure drifted in the frame, scanning the compartment with its empty, hungry presence. For a heartbeat it hung there, then recoiled. It seemed to mumble something, low, inhuman sounds that might have once been words. Ubba, ubba, came a distorted chittering from the corridor, like frightened muttering. Can't, see, nothing. Wrong compartment. That tune was maddeningly familiar. The compartment fell silent for 2 seconds before Lynn exploded down the corridor, voice raw. It's you again. Didn't you learn your lesson last time? You dare disturb my sleep, and now you're on duty on the Hogwarts Express? The Dementor seemed to shrink, and then, as if realizing it had been recognized, it bolted. It fled with a terrified, gurgling wail, sudden, frantic gibberish that might as well have been apologies. Ubba, ubba, ubba! The movement made it scatter black mist behind it. Lynn didn't hesitate. Expecto Patronum. Silver light burst from his wand and formed a magnificent phoenix that hurtled down the corridor after the fleeing thing. Students in other compartments cracked doors to stare as a dramatic pursuit unfolded, a powerful silver Patronus chasing a scampering, smoke-trailing Dementor along the narrow train aisle, while other protective Patronuses flitted about at the rear. The Dementor's cries grew higher and more panicked. Misunderstanding. I was on patrol. I'll never leave home again. Spare me. It sounded absurdly like protestations, and the scene for all its menace had an oddly farcical edge. Under the unrelenting pressure of Lynn's Patronus, the Dementor vanished into the fog beyond the carriages. Another Patronus from farther back chased off a second Dementor, and the oppressive chill evaporated as quickly as it had descended. The silver light faded. Lynn and the others drew their Patronuses back and slammed the compartment door. Edgar, stifling amusement, leaned in. Cough, Lynn, just routine duty then? I don't care if it's routine, Lynn snapped, face dark. It disturbed my sleep, twice. Ollie and William exchanged looks and only shook their heads. A few minutes passed. Knock. The compartment door was knocked on again. 140. Curriculum, come in. The door clicked open again, and a somewhat haggard-looking, middle-aged wizard stepped inside. Lynn turned his head. He didn't recognize the man. Edgar and the others watched the newcomer with equal confusion. "Excuse me, who are you?" William asked. "I forgot to introduce myself," the man said with a tired smile. "I'm the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor this year, Remus Lupin." The four exchanged glances, unsure why the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor had come to their compartment. Polite, if puzzled, they replied in unison, "Hello, Professor." Lupin nodded and got to the point. "You weren't hurt by the Dementors, were you? I heard from the students in the next compartment that you'd been attacked." "We're fine, thank you for asking," Lynn said. Lupin still looked concerned. "If anything comes up, tell a professor, all right?" He didn't linger long. Once he left, several Hufflepuff students from the neighboring compartment crowded into Lynn's doorway. Lynn, Edgar, William, Ollie?" One short, chubby boy peered in. Can we come in? Just to ask a few things." Lynn sighed and resignedly pulled off his eye mask. Edgar, on the other hand, brightened and waved them in. Come in, sit, don't be shy." A handful of Hufflepuffs squeezed into the already small compartment and fixed their attention on Lynn. "Lynn," the chubby boy blurted, eyes shining. "What you summoned just now, that was a Patronus, right? It was definitely the Patronus charm. I read about it in books. It looked so cool." "Was it a phoenix?" a bespectacled girl asked. "I heard Headmaster Dumbledore's Patronus is a phoenix too. But yours seemed a bit different." "Edgar." Another student turned to Edgar. "What animal was your Patronus? It was silvery and kind of bouncy? I've never seen one like that. Is it a magical creature?" "William's was an octopus, right? And Ollie's an elephant? They're all amazing. How did you learn the Patronus charm? Isn't it an advanced spell, even beyond OWL level? Weren't you scared of the Dementors? How did you concentrate? Can you teach us, even just a few tips? Why did that Dementor run away when it saw you? It even helped you close the door. That was so weird." Questions came like a rapid-fire barrage. The four were overwhelmed, though Edgar seemed to be enjoying the attention as he described his rare magical creature, Patronus. Lynn answered the first question. "My Patronus does take the form of a phoenix, but similar forms don't mean they're exactly the same. Patronuses are personal manifestations of someone's inner protective power. That's normal." "As for how we learned it," Lynn glanced at Ollie and William. The three exchanged a knowing look. "Read more, practice more, and most importantly, find a memory that really makes you feel happy." On the Dementor's odd behavior, Lynn shrugged. "Why did it run? Maybe it was being polite. Or maybe it suddenly remembered it left the kettle on at home." The ridiculous suggestion left the Hufflepuffs staring at one another. Was he brushing them off? Still, when they asked to be taught, Lynn agreed. Whether they actually learned it would depend on their own effort. Satisfied with the answers, the students left to spread the news. By the time the sorting ceremony and start-of-term feast wound down, the Dementor incident had become the evening's hot topic. The Great Hall hummed with food, laughter, and chatter. Professor Dumbledore welcomed the new students and introduced Professor Lupin, who received a polite, warm round of applause, certainly more reassuring than some of the previous DA professors. Dumbledore also cautioned everyone to stay safe and avoid areas where Dementors might be present. After the feast, the students dispersed to their common rooms. Back in the Hufflepuff dormitory, the house elves had left the new semester schedules on each desk. Edgar snatched his up, glanced at it, and gave an exaggerated wail. "Arr! Merlin, why are there so many classes in third year? My Quidditch practice. My precious free flying time. It's been reduced again." The third-year timetable was indeed more packed than their second-year one. William, who'd already picked up his schedule, examined it carefully. He always planned things, and he'd chosen only 2 electives, ancient runes and arithmancy. Edgar scoffed and waved his own schedule at them. Divination and Muggle studies. Let's see when those are. Over at Professor Trelawney's, they say as long as you can make things up, or interpret those vague omens, you can do well in divination. Ollie had picked divination and care of magical creatures. Lynn's electives matched Ollie's, divination and care of magical creatures. He'd considered ancient runes, but thought better of it. Professor Babbling was knowledgeable, but he had his own shortcuts. "William, why didn't you pick divination? Why arithmancy?" Edgar leaned over to peer at William's choices. "Divination's more fun. Crystal balls and all. You don't need to use much brain power. William pushed up his glasses. Divination depends too much on talent. Arithmancy, despite the name, is closer to a predictive science. Numbers, charts, logical deduction. There are patterns. It's more scientific. Lynn grinned. Maybe Professor Trelawney's predictions about the Grim are calculated with arithmancy. Like, there will surely be one student who meets with misfortune this year. Probability 2.5%? Edgar and Ollie laughed. William considered the joke for a moment before replying. I can't rule that out, but the way she phrases things isn't exactly precise. They joked for a while longer, then, seeing how late it had gotten, turned in to rest, ready for the first day of classes tomorrow.